She was a single mother with nothing left to lose. Bills stacked like tombstones, eviction papers taped to the door, and a job that paid in humiliation. Then, in one reckless heartbeat, she clicked buy now on an abandoned shopping mall. For just $1,000, everyone laughed, called her crazy. But when she stepped inside that rotting monument of forgotten wealth, she didn't just find dust and silence. Beneath the cracked marble floors and shattered glass, something was waiting, something that would rewrite her life forever, and expose a secret worth $450 million. After the laughter faded from her neighbors' doors and the whispers on her street turned into pity, Claire Lawson sat alone in her dimly lit kitchen, staring at a past due bill that felt heavier than a brick. The clock on the wall ticked like a hammer against her thoughts. Every second was a reminder of how far she had fallen, from promise to poverty, from dreams to desperation. Her son's shoes sat by the door, the soles split open, duct tape holding together what little she could afford. The refrigerator hummed with the sound of emptiness. She had skipped dinner again, telling her boy she wasn't hungry. But hunger wasn't her enemy anymore. Failure was. It lingered in the air like smoke she couldn't clear. Claire had been strong for too long, too quiet for too long, and far too poor for anyone to listen. On her cracked laptop screen, she scrolled through a local auction site, half out of habit, half out of hopelessness. Old factory lots, condemned houses, broken cars, rusted dreams, the kind of things nobody wanted. Then one listing stopped her cold. Abandoned shopping mall starting bid, $1,000. She blinked twice, sure it was a typo. $1,000 for an entire mall. The photos were haunting: graffiti, covered walls, shattered glass, escalators frozen mid-step like metal fossils. But there was something strange about the way the sunlight hit the cracked tiles in one image. It looked almost holy, like a secret calling out to her through the ruin. She laughed bitterly under her breath. Who would even want that? She whispered. Her cursor hovered over the bid now button. It was ridiculous. She barely had that much left in her account. A single wrong move, and she'd have nothing to feed her son with. But there was something magnetic about the listing, something that defied logic. The description was short, almost teasing. Abandoned property, formerly Silverwood Mall. Full ownership rights. No current liens. Sold as is. Her heart pounded. That phrase, a full ownership rights. It meant land. It meant something that couldn't be taken away from her. The old saying echoed in her mind, buy dirt. They're not making more of it. But this wasn't dirt. This was a concrete graveyard of the American dream. She took a shaky breath and looked at the peeling paint on her walls, the empty cereal box in the trash, and the silent hope in her son's eyes each morning when he asked, "Did you find a new job yet, Mom?" She whispered back to herself, "Maybe I just did." Her finger pressed the button. Click, the screen refreshed. "Congratulations, Claire Lawson. You are the winning bidder." Her heart stopped. The words burned on the screen like a flare in the dark. For a moment, she felt weightless, like the world had just handed her a miracle wrapped in mystery. Then reality crashed back. She had just spent everything she had on a decaying mall miles away from her broken home. But deep inside, something stirred, something ancient and defiant. For the first time in years, Claire felt. Awake, she leaned back in her chair, tears stinging her eyes. It wasn't joy. It wasn't fear. It was the feeling of standing on a cliff and realizing you've already jumped. The following morning, the sky was bruised with clouds as Claire packed what little she owned into the backseat of her old sedan. The engine coughed like an old smoker as she turned the key. Her son, Evan, sat in the passenger seat, clutching his worn backpack. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice still heavy with sleep. She smiled weakly. "To see what $1,000 bought us," He frowned. Is it another house? Claire shook her head. Bigger. He didn't ask again. He just stared out the window as the city dissolved behind them. Block by block, memory by memory. The highway stretched ahead like a scar cutting through forgotten land. As miles passed, Claire's thoughts drifted between fear and hope. She imagined the mall as a ruin she could rebuild. Maybe open a small cafe, rent out spaces, anything to escape the chokehold of poverty. The fantasy was thin, fragile, but it was all she had left. When the GPS announced, "You have arrived," she slowed the car to a stop. The road was cracked, weeds tall enough to hide secrets. Before her rose the remains of Silverwood Mall. The sign hung crooked, half the letters missing. The parking lot was a graveyard of nature reclaiming man's ambition. Trees bursting through asphalt, vines wrapping around rusted lampposts. A shattered fountain sat at the entrance, filled with rainwater and time. For a long moment she said nothing. The silence was colossal. Evan leaned forward, eyes wide. "Is this ours?" Claire swallowed hard. "Yeah," she whispered, "all of it." The wind moaned through broken windows, carrying the faint rattle of something unseen. The air smelled like dust and history. It was terrifying and beautiful. She stepped out of the car. Her boots crunched on gravel as she approached the massive glass doors, one cracked open like an invitation from the past. The sunlight slipped through clouds, painting streaks of gold across the facade. Every instinct told her to turn back. Every memory told her she couldn't. She pushed the door open, and the sound echoed like thunder inside the hollow cathedral of consumerism. The air was cool, heavy with mildew and ghosts of laughter long gone. Her footsteps echoed endlessly, bouncing off marble floors that once knew crowds and commerce. Somewhere in the distance, a single metal sign creaked back and forth. The stillness felt alive. Claire turned slowly, taking it all in: the skeletal mannequins, the dust-covered escalators, the faded banners that once promised grand opening, but now hung like epitaphs. Her throat tightened. This was madness. This was beauty. This was hers. A small laugh escaped her lips, shaky and disbelieving. "Well, Claire," she murmured, "you've officially lost your mind." But the truth, for the first time in years, losing her mind felt better than losing her hope. She pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. The flash illuminated a cracked tile floor, and for a split second she thought she saw movement in the reflection, a shadow that wasn't hers. Her breath caught. She looked up. Nothing, just silence, endless and waiting. The wind sighed again through shattered skylights. Dust danced in the light like drifting memories. Claire stepped further inside, unaware that the first step she took into that abandoned mall was also the first step into a secret buried for decades, one that would make her the center of a mystery worth hundreds of millions. Outside, the clouds rolled darker. Inside, the air seemed to breathe. As the door closed behind her with a slow, heavy creak, Claire Lawson disappeared into the forgotten heart of Silverwood Mall. And somewhere deep within the walls, something whispered back. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The echo of the closing door lingered long after Claire stepped inside. For a moment, it felt as if the entire mall inhaled a slow, hollow breath that filled the air with the scent of dust, mold, and something metallic. The temperature dropped slightly, or maybe it was just her nerves. Her footsteps rang out, sharp and lonely, swallowed by the enormous silence. She walked deeper into the atrium, where once glittering tiles now lay cracked and water-stained. Above her, the skylight was shattered. Rain had carved rusted trails down the steel beams, creating ghostly streaks that looked like tears on the glass. Each sound she made seemed amplified in the emptiness. The soft squeak of her shoes, the rustle of her jacket, the faint clink of her car keys. She half expected someone to step out from the shadows, a janitor, a guard, anyone, but there was no one, just her and the echoes of a life that had once filled these halls. Her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating fragments of the past, an overturned baby stroller, a mannequin missing its arm, a faded sail, everything must go, banner drooping from the ceiling. The irony made her smile faintly. Everything had gone, even the hope that once filled this place. But beneath the decay, there was still structure, still space bones strong enough to rebuild something upon. Claire saw potential the way only the desperate could. As a spark hidden inside ruin, she walked toward the central fountain, where empty coins glimmered under a thin film of algae. They looked like promises that had drowned. She crouched down, touched the cold stone, and whispered, "Maybe you still owe someone a wish." The sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere unseen. It wasn't raining outside. Her flashlight swept across the fountain's base, a small, jagged hole where water trickled in from a pipe that should have been dry for years. "Strange," she murmured. Evan's voice startled her. "Mom, is it safe in here?" She turned. He stood at the entrance, framed in the daylight like a shadow on the threshold between two worlds, the one she'd failed to survive, and the one she was about to rediscover. "Yeah," she said softly, though she wasn't sure. "Just watch where you step." He walked in carefully, wide-eyed. The mall dwarfed him, made him look impossibly small. "It's huge," he said, awe in his voice. "It was beautiful once," Claire replied, glancing up at the cracked skylight. "People used to come here to feel alive." He frowned. "Why did they leave?" Claire paused. "Because money left first." The words hung heavy in the air. They didn't need more explanation. He'd seen enough in their own life to understand what happens when money leaves. They wandered further, past storefronts frozen in time. A jewelry store still had displays of imitation diamonds behind shattered glass. A clothing boutique had mannequins dressed in outdated fashion, a ghostly parade of forgotten trends. The food court was silent, its tables covered in dust and dead leaves blown in through broken windows. Claire stopped in front of a map kiosk, one of those bright "You Are Here" directories that once guided happy shoppers. The glass was cracked, the plastic yellowed with age, but as she traced her finger over it, she felt a strange sense of orientation, as if the map was more than a guide, as if it was waiting to be remembered. "You are here," the words echoed in her mind, sharper than they should have been. She smiled faintly. "Yeah," she whispered, "for once, I actually am." Evan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, can we stay here tonight?" Her first instinct was to say no, it wasn't safe, it wasn't clean. But the truth was they had nowhere else. The landlord had already changed their locks that morning. Their old apartment wasn't theirs anymore, she sighed, brushing his hair back gently, "just for tonight." They found an old furniture store on the upper level, where dusty sofas sat in crooked rows. Claire laid out an old blanket from the car and turned her flashlight down to save the batteries. Evan curled up, falling asleep almost instantly. Children have a way of finding peace in chaos. Claire, however, couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the last rays of daylight bleed across the horizon, staining the glass with gold and crimson. The mall felt like a living organism at night, breathing, shifting, remembering. Every creak of metal or whisper of air felt personal. Her thoughts spiraled back to the absurdity of it all. She'd bought an abandoned mall. For $1,000, the world would call it foolishness. But beneath that foolishness was something deeper, a longing to own something the world couldn't take away. Not a job, not a loan, not pity. Ownership meant power, and even if all she owned was a ruin, it was her ruin. The silence thickened. Somewhere deep within the building, something clattered, maybe a piece of glass, maybe a bird, or maybe something else. Claire froze, listening, 1 second, 2, then nothing, just wind humming through the old vents. She exhaled slowly. Get a grip, Claire, she muttered. It's just a building. But the unease stayed with her. Hours passed. The mall settled into night's rhythm, moaning beams, dripping water, the occasional flutter of wings in the rafters. Claire finally closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her under. When she woke, dawn was seeping through the cracks in the skylight. The world outside was grey and soft, but the mall looked different now, gentler. Light played across the cracked floor like rippling water. She stood up, stretching, and walked toward the railing overlooking the atrium. From there, she could see the entire first floor, a labyrinth of stores and hallways stretching into shadow. That's when she saw it. Near the west corridor, one of the lights was on. She blinked, rubbed her eyes. No, it wasn't sunlight. It was an actual bulb, glowing faintly, steady and unnatural in a place that had been dead for years. Her pulse quickened. "Evan," she whispered, but her voice caught. She didn't want to wake him yet. She gripped the railing, heart hammering. The light flickered once, then held. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. Curiosity overpowered fear. She descended the cracked escalator carefully, each step creaking beneath her weight. The air grew colder as she neared the west corridor. The smell changed to less dust, more ozone, like something electrical. The hallway narrowed, flanked by closed storefronts with faded signs. The light was coming from a maintenance door left slightly ajar. She hesitated. Her breath came shallow. Logic screamed to turn back, but desperation doesn't listen to logic, it listens to the faint pulse of possibility. She pushed the door open. Inside was a small maintenance room, cluttered with rusted tools, a shattered mirror, and a dusty desk. But what caught her eye was the computer monitor. It was on. The screen glowed a faint blue, covered in static. She stepped closer, feeling the hum of power through the air. The machine was ancient, one of those heavy box models from decades ago. It shouldn't have been working. The cables snaked into the wall, but there was no generator, no visible power source. Then the static cleared. A single message blinked in green text across the screen. "Welcome back." Claire stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a toolbox. Her pulse roared in her ears. She stared at the words, frozen. Who was this message for? The previous owner? The staff? Her? The cursor blinked beneath the phrase, as if waiting for a reply. Claire swallowed hard, whispered into the silence, "Back." To what? The cursor blinked again, once, twice. Then the screen went black. A sharp sound echoed from the hallway, a metallic scrape, faint but real. Claire turned toward the noise, heart pounding. Nothing moved. The light above her flickered once and steadied. But she could feel it now. She wasn't alone. The air itself felt aware, charged with memory. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "It's just power feedback," she told herself, voice shaking. Old circuits glitching. Still, she backed out slowly, eyes on the shadows until she reached the atrium again. Evan was awake, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" She smiled faintly, though her hands were trembling. "Nothing, sweetheart, just checking the lights." But inside, Claire Lawson knew something had just awakened, not just in the building, but in her life. Something ancient, unfinished, and waiting. As sunlight spread across the mall's ruined floors, she looked up at the flickering skylight and felt the same words echo through her mind. "Welcome back." And deep within the walls of Silverwood Mall, a low hum began, soft, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, waiting to be heard again. As the day began to rise, Claire realized her discovery was far from over. It was only beginning. The morning air was still, heavy with the weight of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Claire stood at the entrance of the mall, watching as the pale light of dawn bled through the cracked glass canopy. Overnight, mist had rolled in, shrouding the parking lot in soft gray. From a distance, Silverwood Mall looked almost peaceful, like a sleeping giant too old to wake. But inside, it breathed differently. The air seemed alive with a quiet hum, a faint vibration that felt less mechanical and more. Remembering, Claire brushed the dust from her jacket and whispered to herself, "Let's see what you're hiding, old friend." Evan trailed behind her, yawning, his small hand gripping a flashlight that barely worked. He looked around with wide eyes, the kind children have when they sense adventure wrapped in danger. "It's creepy," he muttered, his voice echoing. She smiled softly. "Creepy means we're early, before the world catches up." They walked deeper into the atrium. Shafts of light filtered down from the broken skylight above, scattering across the floor like fractured memories. The golden glow illuminated floating dust motes that shimmered like snow in the air. The silence wasn't empty, it was layered, filled with the quiet hum of what used to be life. Claire paused in front of a long hallway, lined with stores whose names were half erased. "Look at this," she said. "See that?" She pointed to a dusty sign that still read Everlast Jewelers. The glass was cracked but intact. Evan peered through the window. Inside, the shelves still held jewelry boxes, most empty, some still glinting faintly with imitation gold. "Why didn't anyone take them?" he asked. "Because people forget," she replied softly. "They walk away and leave pieces behind." As she said it, she realized the truth of her own words. She too had left pieces behind. Dreams she'd buried under bills and long shifts. Laughter she'd traded for exhaustion. But here, surrounded by forgotten luxury and decay, she felt the faint spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. They passed a store that still smelled faintly of perfume. The air inside was thicker, preserved somehow as if time had chosen to pause there. The mirrored walls reflected fragments of the past, mannequins in faded dresses, shelves of expired lotion, a poster of a smiling woman promising beauty forever. Evan wrinkled his nose. "Smells weird." "Memories always do," Claire said, half smiling. The escalator ahead was frozen mid-descent. She placed her hand on the cold railing, feeling the grooves worn smooth by millions of people who once passed here. For a moment, she imagined them all families, couples, friends' voices rising and falling, laughter echoing, the sound of shoes and music and life. It felt like standing inside a memory that didn't belong to her, but somehow remembered her anyway. A small flutter of movement caught her eye. Something darted from the shadows, a pigeon, startled by their presence. It flew upward, wings beating dust into the light. The sound startled her heart, but also made her smile. Evan jumped. "Mom, there's birds in here," Claire chuckled. "Guess we're not the only ones who moved in." They continued walking, their footsteps soft against the cracked tiles. Every few feet, she found traces of the mall's former grandeur, a marble bench still unbroken, a chandelier lying in pieces, its crystals scattered like tears. There was sadness in the beauty, but beauty nonetheless. At the far end of the corridor, she found a door marked Manager's Office. The letters were faded, but still legible. Something about it tugged at her, the way the paint had peeled in perfect streaks, as if time itself was pointing her there. She turned the knob. It resisted, then gave way with a groan. The smell inside was stronger: paper, rust, and damp carpet. She stepped in carefully, her flashlight beam sweeping across the room. A desk sat in the center, buried under a mountain of old receipts, coffee cups, and unopened mail. A nameplate lay face down on the floor. She picked it up, brushed it off. Edward C., Hale Mall Director. She placed it on the desk and whispered, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Hale." There were photos on the wall, faded images of grand openings, smiling employees, ribbon cuttings. Claire touched one of the frames and whispered, "You built something people loved, and they forgot." Evan was flipping through a pile of papers on the desk. "Mom, look." He held up a crumpled flyer. It reads Silverwood Mall 25th Anniversary Celebration. Live music, fireworks, prizes. The date printed on the bottom made her pause. July 2008. "That's the year the crash happened," she murmured. When everything fell apart, she remembered watching the news back then, stores closing, layoffs everywhere. Silverwood must have been one of the casualties. Evan found an old Polaroid tucked under a folder. He handed it to her. It showed a group of employees standing in the same atrium they'd just walked through, bright, clean, alive. In the center was a man in a suit holding a key. Claire turned the photo over. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "To new beginnings, may Silverwood always shine." Her throat tightened. Time had erased that shine, but the echo of it still lingered, stubborn and unbroken. She pocketed the photo. "Let's keep this," she said quietly. "Every place deserves to be remembered." They left the office, but as she pulled the door closed, she noticed something odd, a faint mark on the inside of the frame. A handprint smeared in dust, but newer than everything else. She frowned. "Strange." "What?" Evan asked. "Nothing. Probably just from the maintenance people." But her voice lacked conviction. As they continued exploring, the light shifted. The sun broke through the clouds outside, spilling through the skylight and igniting the dust in golden hues. It was mesmerizing. The ruin glowed, as if awakening from a long sleep. For a fleeting second, Claire felt like she wasn't trespassing. She was reviving something, breathing life into forgotten walls. Evan pointed toward the far corridor. "Look, Mom, there's a store with lights still on." Her pulse quickened. The sign above read Golden Harvest Cafe. The letters were faded, but sure enough a faint glow flickered inside. She hesitated, scanning for wires, any sign of external power. There was none. The building had been disconnected from the grid years ago. "Maybe it's sunlight reflecting," she said quietly, though even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't. They approached slowly. The cafe's interior was a mess: overturned tables, chairs coated in grime, menus still hanging. The counter was covered in old receipts and plastic cups fossilized in dust. But the light was real, faint, pulsing, like a heartbeat beneath the floor. Evan crouched down. "Mom, it's coming from there." Claire knelt beside him. The light was leaking through a crack between the tiles, a thin golden shimmer that pulsed softly, almost alive. She reached out, fingers trembling, and brushed the surface. A faint vibration traveled up her hand, not electricity, but energy, a whisper from the earth below. Then, as quickly as it came, the light faded. Claire sat back, breath caught in her throat. "Okay," she whispered. "That wasn't sunlight." Evan looked at her, eyes wide. "What was it?" "I don't know," she said, voice low. "But I think this place has more stories than we thought." She stood, brushing off her hands, and looked around the cafe, the empty seats, the silent machines, the hollow counter that once held laughter and warmth. The thought hit her suddenly. Maybe this wasn't just an abandoned mall. Maybe it was a time capsule, one the world had sealed too soon. She turned to her son, managing a faint smile. "Come on, kiddo. Let's find where the power really comes from." As they stepped back into the corridor, the light behind them flickered once more, soft, gold, and deliberate. Neither of them noticed. The mall did, and somewhere in its bones, something old had begun to stir. As the day stretched on, the shadows seemed to grow longer, as if Silverwood Mall itself was preparing to remember everything it had ever forgotten. The afternoon light slanted through the skylights like blades of faded gold. Dust hung in the air, turning every sunbeam into a river of time. Claire and Evan walked down the eastern wing, where the air felt colder, the silence heavier. Each step echoed differently here, as if the floor remembered every footstep that had once crossed it. Claire brushed her fingers across the wall, feeling the faint vibration of the building beneath her skin. It wasn't imagination. There was a pulse here, faint, irregular, but alive. "Mom," Evan whispered, "why does it feel like it's watching us?" She glanced down at him, trying to smile, but her heart beat faster. "Old places hold memories," she said quietly. "Sometimes it feels like they're watching back." They passed a shuttered arcade, its neon sign barely legible under layers of grime. Inside, the machines sat frozen mid, game screens dark, coins still trapped inside the slots, joysticks stiff from years of silence. Evan pressed his face against the glass, eyes lighting up. "Can we fix them? Maybe someday," Claire said softly. "But first, we have to figure out what's still working here." She shined her flashlight toward the back of the corridor. At the far end, a faint reflection caught her eye, a glimmer that didn't belong to her light. The glass of a storefront seemed clearer than the rest, almost new. They approached cautiously. The store was called Opaline Interiors. The sign above it was spotless, the paint untouched by time. It didn't make sense. Everything else around it was decaying, yet this shop looked frozen in perfect preservation. The glass door creaked as she pushed it open. A soft chime rang out. Claire froze. It wasn't an electronic sound, it was mechanical. Real, the kind of delicate ring you only hear when a door welcomes customers. She exchanged a glance with Evan, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. Inside, the air was different, warmer, cleaner. The shelves were lined with home decor items that still looked fresh: glass vases, silk curtains, ceramic figures gleaming faintly in the light. "Mom," Evan whispered, "this place doesn't look old." "I see that," she murmured. There was no dust, no decay, as if someone had been here yesterday, not decades ago. On the counter sat an open notebook. Claire hesitated before stepping forward. The pages were crisp, untouched by age. The handwriting was neat, looping, not cursive, not print, something in between. She read aloud the words written across the top of the page. "Inventory check, September 2008. Her chest tightened. That's the year it closed. The entries below listed stock numbers, dates, and initials, each line meticulous, precise until the very last one, which trailed off mid-sentence. The ink dragged as if the pen had slipped from the writer's hand. She traced it gently with her fingertip. "What happened to you?" she whispered. Evan had wandered toward the back of the shop. "Mom," she looked up. "What is it? There's a door here." She walked over, careful not to disturb the shelves. Behind a curtain, a narrow wooden door stood half open. A small brass plaque above it read "Staff Only." Claire hesitated. The air behind it felt colder, almost electric. "Stay here," she said softly. Evan frowned, but, "Please, sweetheart." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, barely more than a storage closet. Boxes were stacked neatly along the walls, labeled and sealed. But in the center of the room sat a metal chair, and beside it, an old rotary phone. The phone wasn't dusty. It gleamed. Her breath caught. The silence around it felt unnatural, too still. She stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath her feet. Then a sound, a single click. The phone's rotary dial twitched, spinning once on its own. Claire froze. It rang, once, twice, 3 times. She couldn't move. The sound was sharp, real, cutting through the decades of silence like a knife. Her hand hovered over the receiver. Logic screamed to leave it alone, but something deeper, curiosity, instinct, destiny, reached for it anyway. She lifted the receiver slowly, static, a low hum, then a voice, distant, distorted, almost mechanical. Hello? Her pulse thundered in her ears. Who is this? The voice crackled. You came back? She gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? You shouldn't be here. The line went dead. The dial tone returned a long, hollow sound that filled the room. Claire lowered the receiver with trembling hands, her breath shaky. She backed away slowly, bumping into a shelf that rattled behind her. A porcelain vase tipped and shattered on the floor. Evan called from the other room, his voice sharp with concern. "Mom, I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing her voice steady. It's fine." She left the room, pulling the door shut behind her. The sound of the latch clicking was too loud in the silence that followed. Evan looked at her face and frowned. "You're pale." "I'm just tired," she lied. "Let's get some air." They stepped back into the corridor. The air felt heavier now, thicker. The mall's stillness had changed, not dead, but listening. Claire looked back at the store. The sign above it, Opaline Interiors, flickered once, as though catching phantom electricity. Then, for a moment so brief it could have been imagined, every store light down the corridor blinked. Claire grabbed Evan's hand. "Let's go." As they hurried back toward the atrium, a strange sound followed, faint footsteps echoing behind them. Slow, deliberate, she stopped. The sound stopped too. Her heart raced. "It's just echoes," she whispered, convincing no one. They reached the main hall, the vast open space that once held fountains and music and life. The light through the skylight had turned orange now, late afternoon, bleeding toward evening. Claire looked up at the cracked glass above her. "You're not forgotten," she whispered, almost to herself. "You're just waiting." Evan tilted his head. "Waiting for what?" She smiled softly, brushing his hair from his face. "To be remembered." But even as she said it, she felt something deeper stir, an invisible thread between her and this forgotten place, tightening. They set up their small camp again in the furniture store. As Evan drifted to sleep, Claire sat awake, staring out through the dusty window at the atrium below. The shadows had grown long, stretching across the floor like dark fingers. And in the far distance, near the west corridor, the same one where she'd found the computer the night before, a single light flickered again. Not steady this time, pulsing, calling. She whispered into the quiet. "What are you trying to show me?" No answer. Only the creak of metal, the whisper of wind through shattered skylights. But deep beneath the floors of Silverwood Mall, machinery hummed faintly, systems that should have been dead decades ago. Somewhere, far below where her flashlight could ever reach, a mechanism clicked into place. Something had awakened. As the last rays of daylight disappeared, Claire Lawson began to understand that Silverwood Mall was more than a ruin. It was a secret, patient and alive, waiting for someone foolish or brave enough to listen. Morning came with the quiet gray of forgotten places. Light crept cautiously through the cracked skylight, pooling across the floor like liquid silver. The air was cold and dry, too still for comfort. Claire woke with a start, her mind heavy from a night of uneasy sleep and whispers she couldn't quite recall. Evan was still asleep beside her, curled beneath a blanket, his small hand clutching the strap of his backpack like a lifeline. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead and smiled faintly. "You deserve better than this," she whispered. Her voice disappeared into the air, swallowed by the enormity of the mall. The silence pressed in. Not the peaceful kind, but the charged, expectant kind that exists in places where something has been waiting too long. Claire stood, stretching her sore legs. Her flashlight flickered weakly before steadying. She swept it across the atrium, scanning for any change. The golden cafe from yesterday was still visible in the distance, quiet and dim. Nothing moved, yet the feeling lingered that the air itself had shifted. She took a deep breath. "One more look around," she murmured. "Then we figure out how to make this place work for us." Her footsteps echoed down the central corridor, bouncing from wall to wall like soft thunder. The mall was vast, far bigger than she'd realized. Every direction led to more darkness, more locked doors, more fragments of a world that had ended abruptly. A sign overhead read West Wing Premium Stores. The lettering was elegant, still faintly golden. She followed the arrow, drawn by instinct. The farther she went, the thicker the air became, filled with the smell of old perfume and rust. She passed stores with their gates half open, merchandise still inside. In one, children's toys sat on the shelves, their packaging faded but untouched. In another, racks of designer clothes hung like ghosts of luxury. Her flashlight beam caught something on the floor: footprints. She froze. They were faint but fresh, cutting through the layer of dust. Not animal tracks, not hers. Human. Claire crouched, tracing one with her finger. The edges were crisp, the sole distinct, a heavy boot tread. Someone else had been here recently. Her heart raced. She turned, scanning the hall, half expecting movement. Nothing, just the soft drip of water somewhere far away. "Okay," she whispered, steadying herself. Maybe security, maybe squatters, but she knew the truth: there was no security. The deed she'd signed made that clear. Nobody had owned this place for years. Nobody cared enough to watch it, except someone clearly had. She followed the trail slowly, her breath shallow, flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. The prints led toward a luxury store sealed by metal shutters. The sign above it was faded but still legible: Ambrosia Fine Jewelry and Timepieces. The shutters were closed, but there was a small gap near the bottom, just wide enough for light to slip through. Light. She crouched down. Inside, a soft glow flickered, steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. "Impossible," she breathed. Claire reached for the shutter. It was heavy, cold to the touch. She gripped it with both hands and lifted. The metal groaned loudly, echoing through the entire corridor. She froze, listening. No response. The sound faded into silence. She raised it higher, enough to duck under, and stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. The air smelled of metal and ozone. Her flashlight flickered, then dimmed. The store was immaculate, glass counters gleaming under a soft, golden light that seemed to come from nowhere. Jewelry still lined the displays: gold watches, diamond rings, necklaces resting on velvet. None of it tarnished, none of it touched by time. Her voice trembled. This shouldn't be here. She approached the counter. The glass was spotless, her reflection clear. Behind it, a register sat open, its screen faintly glowing. Claire's eyes widened. The screen was on. She leaned closer, the hum of static filling her ears. It wasn't showing numbers, it was showing lines of text. System access, restricted user log E. See, Hale last entry, September 14, 2008. Her pulse quickened. Edward Hale, the mall director. The same name from the plaque she'd found in his office. She touched the keyboard. The keys were warm. "How are you running?" she whispered. The text flickered. Then another line appeared, typing itself out across the screen. "Welcome back, Claire." Her blood ran cold. She stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a stool. The words glowed faintly, as if alive. "No," she whispered. "No one knows I'm here." The letters changed again. "You shouldn't have come alone." Her breathing quickened. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How do you know my name?" The screen went black. For several seconds, there was only the sound of her heartbeat. Then, faintly, behind her a soft clink. She turned sharply. One of the glass cases had shifted. Inside it, a gold watch had fallen over, but she hadn't touched it. She swallowed hard, eyes darting around the store. "Evan," she called, her voice trembling. "Evan, are you here?" No answer, only silence. Then, from deep within the corridor, she heard its footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. She froze, listening. They were distant but distinct, echoing through the marble hall. She killed her flashlight, holding her breath. The light from the jewelry store cast faint reflections onto the floor, enough for her to see movement. A shadow slipping past the entrance. Someone was there. Her mind raced. She crouched behind the counter, careful not to make a sound. The footsteps paused. A door creaked somewhere outside. Then silence again. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds, time bent in places like this. When she finally dared to move, the shadow was gone. She stood slowly, legs trembling, and backed toward the shutter. The computer monitor remained black. The jewelry glistened as if mocking her fear. As she ducked out beneath the metal gate, she noticed something new on the wall, faint letters scratched into the paint near the frame. She leaned closer, reading the words etched in jagged strokes. "Don't follow the lights." Her stomach dropped. She turned her flashlight back on, shining it down the corridor. The dust motes spun lazily in the beam, but far ahead in the direction of the old maintenance room, a faint yellow glow pulsed. Not steady, not natural. She swallowed hard, heart pounding in her chest. Whatever had whispered through the machines and stirred in the walls last night, it wasn't done. And now it knew her name. She backed away, whispering under her breath, "You can't scare me. Not anymore." But the truth sat cold in her bones. She was scared, terrified, because the mall wasn't just alive. It was aware. And as the light down the hall flickered once, twice, and steadied again, Claire Lawson realized she was no longer exploring the mall. She was being led through it. The echo of those footsteps clung to her long after they stopped. Every corridor looked the same now, glass, dust, and shadows that felt too deliberate. Claire's breathing grew shallow as she guided Evan back toward the atrium, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked softly. "Nothing, sweetheart," she lied. "Just stay close." But he could hear it in her voice, the edge of fear she tried to bury beneath calm, the kind that mothers use when danger is near, but hope is still pretending to breathe. They reached the central hall again. The faint hum in the walls seemed louder now, more rhythmic, almost mechanical, like something deep beneath the mall was awakening one gear at a time. Claire glanced up toward the second level. The skylight was covered by rolling clouds, dulling the light. A storm was brewing outside. The air smelled of static and rain. She tried to shake the unease clawing at her chest. "Let's check upstairs," she said. "Maybe there's still an office with power." They ascended the old escalator, dead, motionless, yet sturdy enough to climb. The metal steps groaned beneath their feet. Each movement echoed upward like whispers rising from below. At the top, the world felt different. The upper floor was darker, colder. The windows here had been sealed long ago, leaving only fragments of daylight filtering through broken panes. The stores were smaller boutiques, offices, storage rooms. A directory plaque near the railing read, "Level 2 Administration /Security/Maintenance." Her pulse quickened. "Security," she murmured. "If there's still power, maybe there's footage or files." They followed the signs down a narrow hallway, the smell of mildew thick in the air. Somewhere, water dripped steadily, an eternal rhythm marking the passage of forgotten time. The security office was halfway down, door ajar. She pushed it open. Inside, dust covered everything like snow, monitors, desks, keyboards, all untouched. But one screen flickered weakly, casting faint light across the room. The hum of static filled the silence. Claire stepped closer, brushing her hand across the counter. The dust smeared away to reveal a mug with faded lettering, "Silverwood Security, always watching." The irony made her shiver. Evan lingered by the doorway. "Mom, maybe we shouldn't be in here." "It's okay," she said quietly. "If someone left this running, maybe it can tell us what happened here." She pressed a button on the console. The static shifted. For a moment, every monitor blinked, then one came to life. It displayed a grainy black and white feed of the mall's atrium, but the image wasn't from the past, it was live. Claire froze. That's impossible. The screen flickered, focusing. On the grainy display, she saw movement, a faint blur near the west corridor. Something or someone was walking. She leaned closer, squinting. The figure was tall, moving slowly, almost deliberately. It stopped near the jewelry store. Then, as if sensing her eyes through the camera, it turned. Claire's breath caught. The screen distorted for a second, static, glitching lines, then the feed went black. The room fell silent except for the low hum of power. Evan's voice broke the stillness. "Mom, who was that?" She couldn't answer. Her heart thudded so hard it hurt. "We're leaving," she said firmly. But as she turned toward the door, a sound stopped her cold, a faint click. Every monitor in the room blinked to life. Dozens of camera angles filled the screen's stairwells, corridors, the food court, the main entrance. The mall unfolded before her in fragments of grainy footage, and then, one by one, the cameras began turning, refocusing, all pointing toward her. Evan clutched her sleeve. "Mom." The speakers above crackled. A distorted voice came through, deep and broken by static. "You shouldn't be here, Claire." Her blood ran ice cold. She grabbed Evan's hand. "Run." They bolted into the hallway. Behind them, the monitors flashed white, the speakers blaring a piercing tone that echoed through every corridor. It was deafening, chaotic, like the building itself was screaming. They didn't stop until they reached the main escalator again. Claire looked down into the atrium below the fountain, the shadows, the emptiness, everything bathed in faint, pulsing light. It wasn't just coming from the stores anymore. The glow was spreading, bleeding through cracks in the floor, seeping from the walls like veins of liquid gold. Evan gasped. "Mom, it's glowing. I see it." She whispered, "Stay behind me." She descended slowly, watching as the light dimmed and brightened, almost breathing. The hum in the air deepened, resonating through her bones. At the base of the escalator, she stopped. The center of the atrium where the fountain once stood was changing. The cracked stone around it pulsed with faint light, forming circular patterns that spiraled outward, like veins feeding the building. Claire stepped closer, mesmerized. "What are you?" she whispered. The pattern shimmered once, then stilled. She knelt beside the fountain, touching the stone. It was warm, now alive, with faint energy. A sound echoed through the hall, faint, metallic, deliberate. Footsteps again. She stood sharply, scanning the shadows. "Who's there?" The voice that answered wasn't human. It came from everywhere, the intercoms, the walls, even the air itself. "Welcome back." The words were calm, almost kind, but heavy with something deeper, something watching. Evan clung to her arm. "Mom, please, let's go." Claire's voice trembled. "We can't. Not yet." She turned toward the direction of the sound, the western corridor, dark and narrow. The light along the floor pulsed once, leading that way, like breadcrumbs guiding her forward. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, "It wants us to follow." Evan shook his head. "No, Mom, we should leave. It's scary." "I know," she whispered. "But if we don't understand what this is, we'll never be safe." She took his hand again. Together, they walked toward the glowing trail. Every step echoed like a countdown, soft, measured, inevitable. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. The walls tightened, narrowing into what felt more like a tunnel than a hallway. The hum turned into a low vibration that trembled through the floor, and then they saw it. A door, steel, massive, sealed with an electronic lock that still blinked faintly. The light on its panel flickered red, green, red again, as if deciding whether to allow them in. Claire reached out slowly. The air around the door felt charged, humming with restrained energy. Her fingers hovered just above the metal when the panel suddenly turned green. A soft click. The door unlatched. Evan's voice trembled. "Mom, don't." But she couldn't stop. Some invisible pull, part curiosity, part destiny, drove her forward. She pressed her hand against the cold surface and pushed. The door groaned open an inch, then two, releasing a breath of air so cold it felt like it came from another world. Inside was only darkness, but from within that darkness came a faint golden shimmer pulsing softly, like a heartbeat waiting for her touch. Claire whispered, "This is what it's been protecting." The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor beneath her. She looked back at her son. "Stay here." He shook his head violently. "No, Mom, please." She smiled weakly. "I'll be right back, I promise." And before he could stop her, she stepped through the doorway, swallowed by the dark. The steel door creaked shut behind her. The light in the corridor flickered once, then died. Evan stood frozen, staring at the sealed door, heart pounding in his chest. The mall had gone silent again, but this silence was different, deeper, heavier, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Somewhere behind that door, the faint golden light continued to pulse, slow, steady, alive. And in that moment, Silverwood Mall was no longer a forgotten ruin. It was awake. As the echo of that hum faded into the distance, the storm outside broke, rain hammering the roof like applause for the secrets that had just been found. The sound of the rain was steady now, a low, relentless murmur against the shattered skylights. Claire sat by the window of an old office overlooking the mall's atrium, her hands still trembling from what she'd seen the night before. The image of that glowing door and the voice whispering welcome back refused to fade. Morning light washed over the cracked walls, dull and colorless. Evan sat nearby, drawing on a piece of torn paper, pretending not to notice her unease. His quiet focus was the only thing keeping her anchored to the moment. But her thoughts kept circling back, the lights, the voice, the movement in the hallways. The building wasn't just old, it was hiding something. She rose slowly and looked out the window. From here, the mall looked like a carcass stripped of life, yet somehow still pulsing underneath. Every broken store sign, every flickering light felt deliberate, like the place was guiding her somewhere she wasn't supposed to go. Claire whispered to herself, "If you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening." She turned to Evan. "Stay here, okay? Don't wander." He looked up. "Where are you going?" "To find out who used to run this place," she said. "And why it feels like they never left." He hesitated, then nodded, clutching his drawing tighter. "Be careful." She smiled faintly. "Always." The old directory map she'd found in the manager's office showed a second-floor wing marked records and accounting. If the mall's secrets were buried anywhere, it would be there. Claire moved through the corridors, flashlight beam cutting through the dim haze. The air grew colder as she reached the records section, a row of locked offices with frosted glass doors, names half faded from time. One read Accounting Department, Silverwood Management Group. The handle was stiff, but after a few hard pulls, the door creaked open. Inside, the smell of mildew and paper filled the air. Piles of files, boxes, and yellowed ledgers lined the room, stacked high like tombstones of numbers and forgotten debt. Dust floated in the air like snow. Her flashlight swept across the space, landing on a metal filing cabinet marked Confidential. Financial Records 2005-2008. She knelt beside it and pulled the drawer. It stuck for a moment, then slid open with a heavy sigh. Inside were folders, each labeled by date, and one thicker file marked with red tape. Silverwood Expansion Project, E.C. Hale. The name again, the director. She laid it on the floor and opened it carefully. Inside were balance sheets, bank transfers, construction invoices, but something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. Every transaction after mid-2008 showed enormous withdrawals under a shell company called L.M. Holdings. Millions. Gone? Claire's heartbeat quickened. "What were you doing, Mr. Hale?" she whispered. She flipped through the final pages and then stopped. A note was tucked between them. handwritten and almost frantic. If you find this, the vault isn't what they told you. They hid it here, beneath the foundation. The numbers are the key. Her eyes widened. The vault. The word sent a shiver down her spine. She thought of the sealed steel door she'd seen, of the hum behind it, of the golden pulse in the darkness. The note's edges were smeared, as if gripped by someone's sweating hands before being shoved hastily into the folder. She lifted the paper closer to the light, reading the rest aloud. They'll come back for it. The mall was never meant to reopen. If you're reading this, don't trust anyone who claims ownership. Watch for the lights, their markers. The vault responds to them. Claire's breath caught. Responds? The fluorescent light above flickered once, twice, then went out. The room fell into near darkness, her flashlight beam trembling as she swung it toward the ceiling. The air grew colder, pressing against her skin. Somewhere behind her a soft rustle. She turned sharply. Who's there? No answer. The papers on the desk shifted slightly, as if moved by a faint breeze. But there was no breeze. The windows were sealed. She crouched again, gathering the note and tucking it into her jacket pocket. "You're not scaring me," she whispered, but her voice betrayed her. As she stood, her light caught something on the wall, a large framed certificate. The glass was cracked, but the name beneath it was still visible, Edward Charles Hale, Director of Operations, and below that, etched faintly into the frame's edge, as if scratched by hand, "Find the ledger." Claire frowned. Ledger. She turned back to the filing cabinet, scanning the drawers. One at the bottom was marked simply Ledger 9. She tugged it open. Inside lay a single black notebook. No title, no label, only a faint embossed symbol on the cover. A circle intersected by a triangle. Her hand trembled as she opened it. Every page was filled with handwritten entries, names, dates, account numbers. The handwriting was neat, but the numbers were staggering. Transactions worth millions shifted, hidden, disguised through a web of fake corporations. She flipped toward the back. The final entry was dated August 12, 2008, and below it, one line scrawled in larger, shakier writing, "Vault locked. Sequence 17-04-22-08-11. Power routed. Only authorized signature, H." Claire stared at it, the code imprinting itself in her mind like a scar. 17-04-22-08-11. A date, a combination, she didn't know, but it was something. She closed the ledger slowly, the room heavy with silence. Then she noticed something else, faint scratches on the floor, leading from behind the filing cabinet toward the far wall. She crouched, pushing the cabinet aside. The scrape marks were deep, forming a narrow line that ended at a vent cover. She pulled it free and shined her light inside. Metal, wires, and a small glowing red light. Her pulse jumped. The light blinked once, then turned green. A faint click echoed from somewhere below the floor. Claire froze. Oh my God. Something mechanical shifted deep beneath the building, slow, grinding, deliberate. The sound rolled through the walls like distant thunder. She stumbled back, breathing hard. The hum was back, stronger now, vibrating through the floor, through her bones. The note in her pocket burned against her chest like a warning. The vault responds to the lights, and now it was responding to her. The green glow faded. The hum subsided, but something had changed. The air felt charged, as if the mall itself had just exhaled after years of holding its breath. Claire stood alone in the records room, surrounded by ledgers and ghosts, clutching the black notebook to her chest. Outside, the storm raged harder, rain pounding the glass, lightning flashing across the atrium. And for the briefest moment, as lightning illuminated the mall, she saw it, a shadow on the second-floor walkway, tall, still, watching. By the time she looked again, it was gone. Her voice trembled in the empty room. "You're real, aren't you?" But the only answer was thunder. As the echoes faded into the hollow corridors, Claire knew she'd awakened something deeper than money or greed. She'd unearthed a secret built into the bones of Silverwood Mall itself. And it was only beginning to remember her name. The rain hadn't stopped. It pounded against the mall's broken roof like an impatient drum, filling the air with a rhythm that made the walls vibrate. Claire moved through the dim corridors, clutching the black ledger to her chest, her steps fast but careful. Every flicker of lightning through the skylight carved white veins across the cracked marble floors. She could feel it now. The building was alive, pulsing in sync with the storm outside. She glanced over her shoulder once, certain she'd seen movement on the balcony above, but the shadows refused to stay still. She whispered under her breath, "If you're following me, then come out." Nothing, just the rain. She reached the atrium again, where Evan waited near their makeshift camp. He looked up quickly, eyes wide. "Mom, you've been gone for hours." I know," she said softly, kneeling in front of him. "I had to find something, and I did." He looked at the book in her hand. "What's that?" "Proof," she replied, "of something bad that happened here. People hid money, lied about what this place really was, and I think the vault down there isn't just storage." Evan frowned, confused but trusting. "Like treasure, something like that," she said, her tone low. "But it's dangerous. I need you to stay right here, okay?" He shook his head. "I'm not staying alone again." "Evan, I'm not." His voice cracked with fear, and Claire stopped. The exhaustion in his face broke her heart. She sighed, brushing his cheek gently. "Okay, we stay together." The thunder rolled louder, closer. The mall groaned in response, steel beams flexing like muscles under the storm's weight. Claire opened the ledger and flipped to the last page again. The sequence 17-04-22-08-11. The numbers repeated in her mind like a whisper, echoing against the pounding rain. She needed to know what they unlocked. Lightning flashed again, revealing a maintenance sign across the atrium. "Basement access authorized personnel only." That was it. "Come on," she said, "we're going below." Evan hesitated. "But it's dark." She forced a smile. "Then we'll bring our own light." They crossed the atrium, their flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the dark. The storm roared overhead, making the entire building tremble. The maintenance door was rusted shut, its handle cold and slick with moisture. Claire pressed her shoulder against it and shoved. The door groaned open with a metallic scream that echoed through the mall. Beyond it, a staircase descended into blackness. A draft of damp, cold air rose from below. Evan clutched her hand tighter. "It smells bad." "Old places always do," she murmured. "It's just time." But it wasn't just time. It was something else, a deep, stale scent of earth and metal, mixed with the faint sweetness of something burned long ago. They descended slowly, each step creaking underfoot. The deeper they went, the louder the hum became, the same low vibration that had haunted the building since she'd found the computer. It resonated in her chest, almost in rhythm with her heartbeat. At the bottom, they found a long corridor lined with pipes and flickering emergency lights. Faded warning signs hung crooked on the walls. "Danger, electrical access, keep clear, authorized staff only." Claire ran her hand along the wall until she found a switch box. The metal was cold, but when she flipped it, one light flickered weakly to life, then another. The corridor glowed in uneven patches like an artery lit from within. At the far end stood a steel door, unlike the others, thicker, cleaner, untouched by rust. It was built into the wall itself, with an electronic panel beside it that blinked faintly. Evan whispered, "That's it, isn't it?" Claire nodded. "The vault." She approached slowly. The keypad beside it hummed, faint light bleeding from the cracks between its buttons. It shouldn't have been working. The power to this part of the building should have been dead. Yet somehow it lived. She took a deep breath, remembering the sequence. 17-04-22-08-11. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. "Please work," she murmured. She pressed each number carefully. With the final entry, the keypad clicked once, then again. The light shifted from red to green. Evan stepped back. "Mom," the door didn't open. Instead, a deep mechanical sound rolled through the floor, like gears awakening from centuries of sleep. The walls trembled. The hum deepened into a low roar that vibrated through the air. Then, slowly, the steel began to move, not opening, but breathing, expanding and contracting like something alive beneath it. Claire's flashlight flickered. The light overhead dimmed, then steadied. The keypad blinked again. This time words appeared on the small display. "Authorized entry detected. Signature confirmation required." She frowned. "Signature?" The small scanner beneath the keypad glowed red, waiting for input. She glanced at her hand, then back at the machine. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered. "Try it," Evan said softly. She hesitated, then placed her palm against the scanner. The light beneath her hand pulsed once, twice, then turned green. Access granted. The sound that followed was like the shifting of the earth itself. The door unlocked in sections, massive bolts, retracting one by one, each thundering into silence. When the final lock disengaged, the steel door opened an inch, releasing a wave of freezing air. Inside was nothing but darkness. Claire stepped closer. "Stay behind me." She pushed the door wider. The light from the corridor barely penetrated the space beyond, revealing only the edge of a long chamber descending into shadow. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of oil and rusted metal. She took one cautious step forward, her light cutting through the gloom, and froze. Rows of metal crates lined the walls, each stamped with a symbol, the same circle intersected by a triangle that marked the ledger's cover. Some were sealed, others had been pried open. Inside, she caught glints of gold. Her breath hitched. "Oh my God!" Evan's voice quivered. "Mom, is that money?" She shook her head slowly. "Not money, sweetheart, something much bigger." She stepped closer, running her hand along one crate's edge. The markings beneath the dust became clearer. U.S. Federal property confiscated 1979. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "This isn't a mall vault. This is storage, government storage. But for what?" Her flashlight swept farther, and there, at the end of the chamber, a figure stood, still, silent. Claire froze, light trembling in her hand. "Who's there?" she called out. The figure didn't move. Then lightning flashed outside the faint glow, cutting through the doorway, and she saw it clearer. It wasn't a person. It was a mannequin, dressed in a black security uniform, its head tilted slightly to one side. But what made her blood run cold wasn't the uniform. It was the badge pinned to its chest. E.C. Hale. Her flashlight slipped from her hand, clattering on the floor. The light rolled, casting long, warped shadows across the crates. The hum returned, deep, steady, and louder than ever. The mannequin's head shifted just a fraction, enough to make her step back, heart pounding in her throat. "No," she whispered, "that's not possible." The light behind her flickered violently, bursting once before plunging the corridor into near darkness. She grabbed Evan's arm. "Run." They sprinted back toward the stairwell, the echo of the hum chasing them up the hall like thunder underfoot. Behind them, the vault door began to close, slow, mechanical, deliberate. The sound reverberated through the floor as the final lock slammed into place with a deafening boom. When they finally reached the top of the stairs, Claire slammed the maintenance door shut, her chest heaving. Rain poured harder than ever, leaking through the ceiling, streaking down the walls like veins of silver. Evan clung to her side, trembling. "Mom, what was that?" She stared at the door, still hearing the low pulse beneath her feet. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think Mr. Hale never left this place." The thunder outside rolled again, shaking the glass. Claire turned toward the atrium, and for just a second she saw movement in the reflection of the skylight above them. Someone or something watching from the second-floor railing. Lightning flashed, and it was gone. As the echoes of the storm merged with the hum beneath the floors, Claire realized Silverwood Mall was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a trap built to contain the ghosts of its own greed. The night was louder than usual. The storm had broken fully now, thrashing against the old mall's roof like an angry ocean. Every crash of thunder seemed to echo through the building's steel skeleton, rattling the glass and stirring echoes that didn't feel entirely human. Claire sat by the shattered fountain, the faint orange glow of her camping lantern cutting through the dark. Her hair clung to her face, soaked with sweat and rain that slipped through the skylight above. The black ledger lay open in her lap, its ink smeared in places from damp fingers. She had read the final page over and over again, vault locked, sequence engaged, authorized signature required. Each time she whispered the words, they sounded less like instructions and more like a warning. Evan slept beside her, wrapped in a blanket, the sound of his breathing steady. She envied how easily he could rest after what they'd seen. Children, she thought, don't yet understand what kind of ghosts money leaves behind. Claire looked up toward the dark ceiling. The faint hum beneath the floor hadn't stopped since she touched the vault door. It came in waves, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat just beneath the concrete. It was alive, she could feel it. She whispered into the silence, "What are you?" Her voice vanished into the space, swallowed whole. When dawn came, it was gray and heavy, the storm clouds refusing to break. The mall felt colder, darker, even the air tasted metallic. Claire packed their things and woke Evan gently. "Come on, sweetheart," she said, "we can't stay here today." He rubbed his eyes. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet." She replied, "I need to think." But there was no quiet place in Silverwood. The building itself was never silent. Every corridor seemed to whisper, every flickering light carried memory. They made their way down the main hallway toward the service corridor again. Claire needed answers, and if those answers were hidden in the dark, then she would find them. As they passed the old food court, a strange metallic scent hit her. She paused. Something was different. The air was sharp, charged like the aftermath of lightning. She turned her flashlight toward the ground. Footprints, fresh, not hers, not Evan's, and this time there were two sets, one large, one smaller, both leading toward the west corridor, where the vault door waited beneath the floor. Her pulse quickened. "Evan," she whispered, "stay close to me." They followed the prince cautiously. The farther they went, the colder it became, as though the temperature dropped with each step. The faint hum grew louder, deep, rhythmic, almost like the slow breathing of a sleeping giant. They reached the maintenance stairwell. The door she had forced open the day before was still ajar, but now the lock hung twisted, broken from the inside. Her flashlight beam trembled as she peered down the stairs. The light barely touched the bottom, but she could see movement, the faint glint of something metallic swaying gently. Someone was already down there. She swallowed hard. Hello, no answer. Only the slow, steady drip of water from the pipes. "Whoever's there," she said louder, "this property's mine. You're trespassing." The silence that followed felt wrong, not empty, but waiting. Then came the voice, low, male, close. "You shouldn't have opened it." Claire froze. The words rolled up the stairwell like smoke, calm and heavy. She turned to Evan, pressing a finger to her lips. He nodded, eyes wide. She took a slow step forward, then another, descending halfway down the stairs. Her flashlight cut through the dark, sweeping across the walls, the pipes, the concrete floor below, and then caught movement in the corner. A man stood at the far end of the corridor. His back was to her. He wore a maintenance uniform, faded blue, the logo on the sleeve almost erased. His posture was rigid, hands clasped behind him. Claire steadied her breath. "Who are you?" The man didn't turn. "You shouldn't have opened it." He repeated, voice flat, almost rehearsed. "I'm the owner now," Claire said, forcing confidence into her trembling voice. "If you're a squatter or worker, you need to leave." Finally, he turned his head slightly, not enough for her to see his face, just enough for the weak light to touch his profile. His skin looked pale, too pale. "I kept it closed," he said softly, "for years, but the lights came back on. That's when it started again." Claire took another cautious step. "What started?" He looked at her now fully, suddenly, and she stumbled back a step. His eyes were empty, clouded like glass. His face was expressionless, drained of life, yet somehow aware. "The noise," he whispered. "It never stops once it knows your name." And then, before she could react, the lights flickered violently. The hallway plunged into black for a heartbeat, then came alive again, but the man was gone. Claire gasped, spinning, flashlight beam cutting through empty space. "Mom," Evan whimpered from above. "Who was that?" She forced herself to breathe. "Nobody," she said quickly. "Come on, we're leaving." But even as she said it, the hum under the floor grew louder, vibrating the air until the walls themselves seemed to tremble. They ran back up the stairs, slamming the maintenance door shut behind them. The sound echoed through the hall like a cannon shot. Claire leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "Mom," Evan whispered. Was he a ghost? Claire stared at the floor, unable to answer. Her pulse was still thrumming in her ears. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I think whatever he was guarding, it's still down there." Rainwater trickled through the skylight, streaking down the wall beside them. The storm outside hadn't eased, and with every rumble of thunder, the hum beneath their feet seemed to respond like two storms calling to each other. Claire knew she should leave, take Evan, get in the car, and never look back. But something inside her refused. The same instinct that had made her buy this place was now stronger than fear. The mall had chosen her. She could feel it. She stood slowly, gripping the ledger tighter. "We're not done," she said under her breath. "Not yet." Evan looked up at her, worry shadowing his small face. "You're going back down there, aren't you?" Claire didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. She turned her gaze toward the dark corridor that led back to the vault. The lights along the walls flickered weakly, one by one, forming a faint, uneven path that pulsed like a heartbeat leading her forward. Every rational part of her screamed to turn away, but the hum beneath her feet wasn't just noise anymore, it was calling her. She whispered, almost to herself, "If this place wants me to see, then I'll see." As she took her first step back into the dark, the sound of the rain faded, replaced by something deeper, the metallic rhythm of gears turning far below, grinding awake after years of silence. And as Claire descended once more toward the vault, she realized the truth was no longer buried beneath Silverwood Mall. It was rising to meet her. The storm outside hadn't stopped. It had only changed rhythm. Now the rain fell in steady, deliberate waves, like an ancient pulse, sinking with the one she felt beneath her feet. Claire descended the stairs again, every step an argument between reason and obsession. She should have taken Evan and left, but the sound below had turned into something more than a hum. It was breathing. Each footstep echoed into the dark, bouncing off concrete and steel. The flashlight in her hand cast a trembling beam ahead of her, its flicker matching the quick staccato of her heartbeat. She whispered to herself, "You've come this far, Claire. Just find out what's down here and then you can rest." But deep down she knew rest wouldn't come. Not until she understood why this place called her name. The lower corridor stretched out like a throat of the earth. Pipes, running along the ceiling, condensation dripping down in slow rhythm. The metallic smell grew stronger the closer she got to the vault. It was sharp, cold, electric. Halfway down the corridor she stopped. The door was open. Her pulse surged in her ears. She remembered closing it, hearing the heavy locks engage, but now it stood slightly ajar, fog curling out from the darkness within. She turned the flashlight toward it. No, 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 no. The steel gleamed under her light, wet with condensation. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, but curiosity was no longer curiosity. It was compulsion. "Mom," Evan's voice came softly from behind her, hesitant. Claire spun. "Evan, I told you to stay upstairs." He shrank under her tone, eyes wide. "I didn't want you to be alone." Her anger melted instantly, replaced by fear. "Okay, stay close, don't touch anything." They approached the vault together. The door, now fully open, revealed the cavernous room beyond. A chill spilled out from it, biting at their skin, turning their breath visible. The flashlight beam cut across the floor. The crates were still there, but several had been moved. Drag marks streaked through the dust, fresh and deep. Someone had been here again. The light caught on something reflective near the far wall. Claire crouched, squinting. A security camera, old, cracked, but still faintly humming. Its tiny red indicator light blinked once, then twice. Evan whispered, "Mom, someone's watching us." Claire's throat went dry. "I think they've been watching us for a while." She scanned the walls, more cameras, 4, maybe 5, small, discreet, hidden between the vents. A faint ticking noise filled the air, like old machinery trying to start again. And then the lights flickered on, soft, dim, but enough to see everything. The room was enormous. Metal walkways lined the edges, connecting to raised platforms where the crates sat neatly arranged in rows. Each one was marked with the same circular insignia from the ledger, a triangle intersected by a ring. But at the center of the room stood something different, a pedestal, and on that pedestal, an object sealed under thick glass. It wasn't gold. It wasn't money. It looked like an artifact, an old key, carved from a metal so dark it reflected no light. Symbols ran along its length, the same ones she'd seen scrawled in Hale's notes. Her chest tightened. This is what they hid. She stepped closer, drawn to it. The air around the pedestal shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. As she neared, the humming deepened, vibrating through her bones. Evan tugged her sleeve. "Mom, don't." But she didn't stop. She placed her palm against the glass. It was cold, so cold it burned. A spark snapped against her skin. She yanked her hand back with a gasp. The lights flickered violently, and the hum turned into a deep mechanical growl. The vault came alive. Alarms that hadn't sounded in decades wailed through the concrete. Red lights spun across the walls. The cameras swiveled. Mechanical eyes waking after long sleep. "Run!" Claire shouted, grabbing Evan's hand. They sprinted for the exit, but the door began to close automatically. The grinding of gears echoing like thunder. Claire lunged forward, pulling Evan through the narrowing gap just as it slammed shut behind them. The noise stopped instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire leaned against the wall, gasping for air. Evan clung to her arm, tears welling in his eyes. "What's happening?" She shook her head. "It's some kind of security system. We triggered it." But even as she said the words, she didn't believe them. The sound, the lights, the movement, it didn't feel like a system reactivating. It felt like awareness. She turned her flashlight back toward the door. The red indicator light on the keypad was glowing steadily again. A new message blinked across the small display. Unauthorized access detected. Lockdown sequence initiated. A hiss filled the air. The sound of vents opening. The lights in the corridor began to dim one by one, swallowed by darkness from the far end moving closer. Claire's chest tightened. Evan, move, they ran. The darkness chased them, devouring light as it came, the hum rising to a roar. The air grew heavy, vibrating with pressure. The feeling was unmistakable, like the building itself was shifting, closing in. They burst through the maintenance door and into the atrium, slamming it shut behind them. The moment it clicked, the sound stopped. Silence. Evan was crying now, his small frame shaking. Claire held him tight, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay, I've got you." But her voice cracked. She didn't believe it herself. Slowly, she turned toward the skylight. The storm had stopped. No thunder, no rain. Only the faint hum of the mall's lights, glowing in scattered patches across the ceiling. And then she saw it. On the far side of the atrium, where the security balcony overlooked the main floor, a figure stood, tall, still, watching. Lightning flashed far away, illuminating him for a heartbeat. The same uniform, the same face she'd seen in the basement, the maintenance man with the clouded eyes. This time he spoke. His voice rolled through the air like distant thunder. "You woke it up." Claire froze. "What did I wake?" He tilted his head. "The vault isn't for keeping things safe. It's for keeping them in." Before she could speak, the lights above them burst, raining glass across the floor. The figure was gone. Claire stood motionless, her breath shaking, the words echoing in her skull. "It's not for keeping things safe. It's for keeping them in." She turned slowly toward the maintenance corridor. The door was closed again, the keypad's light flickering faintly. From behind it came the faintest sound, a low, rhythmic knock. Not random, not mechanical, deliberate. 3 slow taps, then silence. She backed away, pulling Evan toward her. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "We're leaving. Tonight." But deep down, she knew it wouldn't let them go. The mall was awake, and whatever was inside the vault, it had found its way out. As the lights above flickered one final time, Claire realized Silverwood Mall was no longer haunted by its past. It had become something else entirely, a prison that had just lost its key. The next morning came gray and hollow. A weak sun hovered behind the clouds like an old bulb that had forgotten how to shine. Claire's hands trembled as she poured what little water they had left into a cup for Evan. Neither of them had slept. The knocking from below hadn't returned. But silence was no comfort now. Silence meant it was listening. Evan sat by the edge of a dusty sofa, his eyes swollen from exhaustion. "Can we go home, Mom?" he asked softly. Claire forced a smile she didn't feel. "We don't have a home, sweetheart. Not yet. But we will soon." He nodded, trusting her the way only children can trust, even when the world around them is falling apart. But deep inside, Claire's certainty was cracking. Something was wrong with Silverwood. Something far older and larger than missing money or forgotten ownership. The man from the basement, the voice in the intercom, the way the vault breathed. It all connected somehow. And the only living person who might know what she was dealing with was the one name that kept appearing in the old files. Edward C. Hale, except Hale was supposed to be dead. She sat by the flickering lantern, clutching the ledger, tracing the indentation of his handwriting. It wasn't just accounting. His notes were confessions, filled with phrases that didn't belong in a balance sheet. It speaks when the power returns. The vault is not for gold. The light is a warning, not a guide. Claire exhaled slowly. "You knew. You tried to stop it." She turned to Evan. "We're going for a drive. Just a short one." "Where?" "To find someone who used to work here. Someone who might tell us what this place really is." They loaded into the car. The mall loomed in the rearview mirror, massive, brooding, almost alive against the dull horizon. As she drove toward the edge of town, the rain finally stopped, leaving behind streets slick with silver light. She remembered the name from one of the storage boxes. Consultant Martin Hawthorne. He'd been listed on the payroll during the final months of operation. If anyone had seen Silverwood before it fell silent, it was him. After an hour of searching, she found his address in the county's faded directory, a small, leaning farmhouse on the outskirts of old Timberland. The wind howled through the broken trees as she pulled into the dirt driveway. "Wait in the car," she told Evan gently. "Lock the doors." He frowned, but, "Please." Her tone left no room for argument. She stepped out, her shoes sinking into the mud. The farmhouse stood crooked and tired, its windows boarded except for one upstairs, where a thin light flickered. She knocked once on the door. No answer. She tried again, louder. "Mr. Hawthorne, my name is Claire Lawson. I bought Silverwood Mall." The light upstairs went out. Her heart jumped. "Please, I just want to talk." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, the door creaked open an inch. A man's voice rasped from the darkness. "You bought what?" Claire swallowed. "Silverwood Mall. I'm looking for information about what happened there. I found your name in the old records." A pause. Then the sound of a lock sliding free. The door opened fully. Martin Hawthorne was older than she expected. Thin, hollowed, cheeked, with a gray beard and eyes that looked like they hadn't seen daylight in years. He held a lantern in one trembling hand. "Come in," he said softly, quickly. The interior smelled of old wood and oil. The floorboards creaked as he led her to a cluttered kitchen filled with maps, boxes, and yellowing newspaper clippings. He set the lantern on the table, its light trembling across the walls. "You shouldn't have gone there," he said, not looking at her. "It was supposed to stay buried." Claire sat carefully. "I didn't know. I just saw the listing. It was $1,000. He gave a dry laugh. $1,000 to inherit a curse. "What does that mean?" He turned toward her, eyes catching the lantern's glow. They built Silverwood on top of something they didn't understand. The land wasn't clean. It was bought from a private excavation project in the 70s. That project was shut down after workers started disappearing. The company buried everything and sold the site cheap. Developers thought they were lucky. Claire felt her stomach drop, and they built the mall right on top of it. Yes, but Hale, he knew. He tried to contain it. The vault wasn't a bank vault, Mrs. Lawson. It was a containment chamber. Reinforced steel, biometric locks, energy dampeners, built to keep something in. Her pulse thudded. Something. What? Hawthorne hesitated. They said it was electromagnetic residue radiation from underground ore. But Hale told me once, over drinks, that it wasn't radiation at all. He said it spoke to him. It whispered through the power lines. He said he could feel it breathe. Claire's throat tightened. "I heard it too. It's still there. It's awake." Hawthorne went pale. "Then it knows you." He moved quickly, rummaging through a drawer until he found a folder thick with documents. He shoved it across the table. "Here, everything I kept. Don't stay there another night. The longer you're inside, the louder it gets." Claire opened the folder, her fingers trembling. Inside were blueprints, schematics of the mall's foundation, each layer marked with warning symbols and strange annotations. Beneath the sub-basement, there was an unlabeled chamber, bigger than the vault, deeper, shaped like a circle. "What's this?" she asked. "That," Hawthorne said, "is where they found it before they built the mall. They called it the core. Hale sealed it off before the grand opening. He said the light from it could drive a person mad." Claire's vision blurred. The golden glow, the warmth through the floor, the whispers through the intercom. It wasn't her imagination. "What happened to Hale?" she asked quietly. "He stayed behind when they evacuated in 2008, Hawthorne said. "The power surge started that night. They said he died in the blackout, but no one ever found his body." The room fell silent except for the creak of the wind outside. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "I saw him." Hawthorne froze. "You saw Hale?" She nodded slowly. In the basement, his name tag, his face, he spoke to me. The old man stared at her for a long, hollow moment. Then it's not him anymore. He reached for her wrist suddenly, gripped tight despite his frail hands. Listen to me. Whatever's down there, it doesn't want gold or power. It feeds on attention, on curiosity. Every person who listens to it, who touches it, becomes part of it. Claire pulled her hand free, her voice shaking. Then how do I stop it? You don't, he whispered. You leave it alone. Lightning flashed through the window, followed by the distant growl of thunder. Claire stood slowly, clutching the folder. Thank you for your time, Mr. Hawthorne. He didn't rise. He only watched her with tired eyes. When it starts whispering again, don't answer it. She paused in the doorway, and if it already has, he looked away, then it's already inside. Claire stepped out into the rain, the cold slicing through her like knives. She climbed into the car, her hands shaking. Evan looked up from the back seat. Did he help? She forced a small, trembling smile. Yeah, she lied. He helped. As they drove away, she glanced at the mirror. Hawthorne stood at his door, watching them vanish into the storm. Behind him, through the half-drawn curtain, a faint golden glow flickered in the window. And though she didn't know it, before the night was over, that glow would spread through the farmhouse like wildfire. As the wind howled and the road curved back towards Silverwood, Claire realized that the mall hadn't just found her. It had been waiting. The drive back to Silverwood was long and mercilessly quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky drained of color, washed pale and sickly. The wipers dragged across the windshield with a dry squeal, pushing aside streaks of mud left by the rain. Evan sat curled in the back seat, clutching his toy car, staring at the endless road ahead. He didn't speak, and Claire didn't press him. The air between them was thick with the things neither of them could name. On the passenger seat, the folder Martin Hawthorne had given her lay open, its pages trembling slightly from the hum of the tires. Each document, each photograph was a wound opened wide, proof that Silverwood Mall was built over something ancient and deliberate. Claire's eyes flicked to the topmost page whenever she stopped at a red light. Project Silverwood Containment Division, it read, underneath in faded type, site to remain sealed in perpetuity, breach protocol, absolute evacuation. Her throat tightened, perpetuity, forever. Yet somehow someone, or something, had reopened it. The road narrowed into a cracked lane that led back toward the edge of town. The landscape looked the same as it had before, yet different now that she knew. Every tree seemed to lean inward, every shadow stretched too long. Evan finally broke the silence. Mom, what did he say? She glanced at him in the mirror. His face was pale, eyes round and glistening. He said we were right to be scared. She admitted softly. Are we leaving? Claire hesitated. Every instinct screamed yes, but her hands stayed tight on the steering wheel. Not yet. Why not? Because if we don't understand it, someone else will come after us, and they won't stop. Evan's lips trembled. What if it hurts us? Claire's voice faltered. Then I'll make sure it never hurts anyone else again. They drove the rest of the way in silence, the outline of the mall rising in the distance like a monument to ruin. Even from miles away, its shadow bled into the sky. When they arrived, the parking lot shimmered faintly in the dusk light. Water pooled in the cracks like dark mirrors. The wind carried a sound low, distant, almost like whispering. But when Claire turned off the engine, it stopped. She stepped out slowly, the air cold and dense, the smell of wet concrete mixed with something metallic, familiar now, almost comforting in a sick way. She turned to Evan. Stay close, and whatever happens, don't go near the vault again. He nodded, his hand finding hers instinctively. They crossed the entrance. Inside, the silence was immense. Dust had already settled over the floor again, erasing any trace of their panic from the night before. Yet Claire could feel it, the vibration, faint, like a breath beneath her boots. She laid a hand on the nearest column, feeling the concrete pulse. "It's feeding," she whispered. They made their way back toward the manager's office on the upper floor. If Hawthorne was right, if Hale had sealed something deeper than the vault, then the blueprints in that office might show the missing connection. The office was just as she'd left it. Papers scattered, the nameplate still lying on the floor, its metal edge glinting dully. The broken computer monitor sat lifeless now, its once flickering screen dead. Claire spread Hawthorne's folder across the desk. The documents showed layer upon layer of the mall's structure, each basement level deeper than the last. She traced the lines with her finger until she found it, an unmarked circle beneath the vault, the core. The circle was surrounded by handwritten warnings in Hale's jagged script. No light below. Containment must hold. If seal fails, shut down all power. She whispered the words aloud, her voice trembling. Shut down all power. That's what the surge had been in 2008. Hale hadn't died in an accident. He'd sacrificed the building to cut the power, to silence whatever was underneath. "Mom," Evan's voice pulled her back. He was standing by the window, pointing outside. "There's someone out there." Claire turned. Through the cracked glass she saw a van parked near the loading docks. Its headlights were off, but its engine was running. Her pulse spiked. "Get down." They ducked behind the desk. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall below. Steady, deliberate, multiple sets. Voices murmured. She couldn't make out the words, but she knew that tone authority, not curiosity. Someone had come for the mall. She peeked over the desk. 3 men moved through the atrium, their flashlights cutting sharp beams through the dark. They weren't looters. They moved with purpose, scanning, sweeping. The beam from one light lingered on the broken fountain before moving toward the maintenance corridor. One of them spoke, his voice carrying, "It's active again. The sensors are reading spikes." Another answered, lower, colder, "Then it's open. Finish the retrieval before the new owner finds out." Claire's stomach turned. The new owner, they meant her. She grabbed Evan's hand and whispered, "Quiet. We have to move." They slipped out of the office, down the back stairwell, keeping low. Every creak of the steps sounded like a gunshot in her ears. She could hear the men moving through the lower level now, metal boots striking the floor, radios crackling faintly. At the base of the stairwell, Claire paused, pressing her back against the wall. Evan clung to her arm. "Mom, who are they?" "I don't know." She breathed, "But they're not here to help." The corridor ahead was dark, but a faint golden glow shimmered at its far end. The same unnatural light she'd seen before. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like the heartbeat of something vast and unseen. "Mom," Evan whispered, "it's the light again." "I see it," she murmured. "Don't look at it too long." The air grew thicker as they moved toward the exit. Every breath felt heavy, as if the atmosphere itself resisted them. The hum deepened, louder with each step, until it matched the thunder of her heartbeat. Suddenly, from behind them, a shout. "Hey, someone's here." Claire froze. The beam of a flashlight swept across the wall, catching her shoulder. "Run," she shouted. They bolted down the corridor, their footsteps pounding the floor. The men followed, their shouts mixing with the rising hum of the building. Claire's lungs burned, but she didn't slow. They burst into the atrium just as another light flared overhead, the emergency panels coming alive one by one, bathing the mall in an eerie, golden glow. The hum turned into a roar. The floor beneath them trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Claire grabbed Evan and Dove behind a fallen display pillar. Across the atrium, the men stopped, shielding their eyes as the glow intensified. "Shut it down," one of them shouted. "Kill the feed," but it was too late. The light burst upward from the cracks in the floor, swirling in concentric circles like a living storm. It wasn't just illumination, it was matter, liquid and radiant, rising through the fissures like veins of molten gold. Evan screamed, covering his face. Claire held him tight, eyes wide as the energy spiraled higher, touching the ceiling before collapsing inward. And then, silence. When she opened her eyes again, the light was gone. The men were gone too. Only the echo of their voices lingered, swallowed by the vast emptiness. Claire stood slowly, her knees weak. The cracks in the floor still glowed faintly, as if embers were trapped beneath the concrete. She whispered to herself, "It's awake." Evan clutched her hand, trembling. "What do we do now?" She looked down at him, her face pale, eyes hollow but fierce. "We finish what he started," she said. "We shut it down." From the depths below, a low, metallic rumble answered her, a sound that wasn't quite mechanical and not quite alive. As the last flicker of gold faded from the floor, Claire realized the fight for Silver Wood wasn't about survival anymore, it was about containment. Night returned like a bruise across the sky. Silverwood Mall was darker than it had ever been, every light extinguished, every window reflecting nothing but storm clouds and silence. Yet even without electricity, the faint hum beneath the floor continued, steady and deep, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Claire crouched beside a toppled pillar near the atrium's center, her flashlight off. She watched the mall through the narrow crack between marble and shadow, her breath controlled, her mind sharp despite the exhaustion clawing at her. The men were back. She could hear their boots, the hollow rhythm of trained movement echoing across the vast, empty hall. Their flashlights cut thin, precise lines through the dark. They didn't wander aimlessly like scavengers. They were organized, speaking in short commands over muffled radios. She caught a fragment of a voice, Team 2, secure the sublevel, authorization hail, Sigma clearance confirmed. Her stomach dropped. Hail, that name again. Whoever these men were, they were connected to the man who had built this nightmare, and possibly whatever still lived inside it. Evan lay hidden behind her, under a blanket, clutching his backpack like a shield. His wide eyes reflected the faint light seeping through the cracks. "Mom," he whispered, "they're the same people from before, aren't they?" "Yes," she whispered back, "and this time they know we're still here." She pressed her ear to the cold floor. The hum was different tonight, less mechanical, more alive. It rose and fell in waves, matching the rhythm of the men's movements, almost responding to them. The mall could feel them too. "Stay here," Claire said. "If anything happens, run toward the west exit. Don't stop for me." Evan's voice cracked. "No, I'm not leaving you again." Her chest tightened, but there was no time to argue. She brushed his hair back gently, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Then stay quiet, no matter what." She rose silently, slipping through the corridor toward the management wing. The darkness swallowed her whole. The only sound was the distant hum, and the faint static of radio chatter echoing off the walls. The hallway smelled like damp plaster and metal. Her shoes made no sound against the floor. She'd learned how to move like the silence itself. Ahead, one of the men stood near the old security office, the same place where she'd once seen the monitors flicker to life on their own. He was checking the control panel, muttering under his breath. Claire crouched behind a cracked wall, straining to hear. System core still responding, internal sensors online, signal spike matches preach, down readings, vault breach confirmed. Another voice came through his earpiece. "Retrieve the signature. If it's reactivated, we don't have much time before it spreads again. Retrieve the signature." The phrase pulsed through her brain, sharp and cryptic. She peeked out just as the man crouched to connect a cable to a small scanning device. Its screen glowed faintly, pulsing in the same golden hue she'd seen radiating from the floor. Her hand tightened around the small metal wrench she'd picked up earlier, a desperate weapon, but something solid nonetheless. Then, from the radio, Agent Rourke, confirm. Did the Lawson subject make contact with the vault directly? The man straightened. Affirmative. Thermal trace shows full palm scan match. She's bonded. Bonded. Claire's breath caught. She stumbled back a half step, a floorboard creaking beneath her weight. The man froze. He turned sharply, flashlight cutting through the dark. The beam swept across the corridor, slicing dangerously close to where she crouched. "Who's there?" Claire bolted. The shout came instantly. Movement. North hallway. She sprinted down the corridor, her feet pounding against the tile, echoing like gunfire in the silence. The hum in the walls surged in rhythm with her heartbeat, louder, angrier. Behind her, flashlights flared, boots thundered. "Stop, hands up." She darted into a side passage, slamming the door of an old maintenance closet behind her. The darkness was suffocating. She pressed her back against the wall, chest heaving, listening as the men's footsteps drew closer. Sector 5, check the storage wing. One of the flashlights passed the crack under the door, flooding it with white for half a second. Then silence. Claire waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. When she finally exhaled, the sound felt deafening. She reached for her flashlight but stopped. There was already light inside the room, a faint golden shimmer. She turned slowly. At the back of the closet, where the wall met the floor, a thin line of gold pulsed like a heartbeat through the concrete. It traced upward in delicate threads, into the ceiling, into the walls, spreading like veins. The hum deepened. Claire whispered, "What are you doing to me?" The golden light responded, brighter now, throbbing once before dimming again, almost like it had understood her. She stepped back, terrified but unable to look away. The air thickened with static, her hair rising on her arms. Then, faintly, beneath the noise, she heard it. A voice, not in the room, not through her ears, but inside her skull. "Claire, Lawson." She froze. The voice was smooth, low, and resonant. Neither male nor female, but something between. It spoke with the patience of time itself. "You opened the gate. You carry the mark." Claire shook her head violently. No, I didn't. I didn't mean to. The vault remembers its keeper." Her pulse pounded so hard she thought she'd pass out. "What are you?" Silence. Then, softer. The beginning. The lights outside flickered violently. The hum turned to a low roar, the entire corridor trembling. Claire stumbled back as the golden light from the walls flashed blindingly bright, then vanished completely, plunging the room into black. The door burst open. 2 of the men stormed in, flashlights flaring, hands where I can see them. Claire raised her arms instinctively, blinking against the light. "Don't shoot," she gasped. One of them grabbed her arm, pulling her roughly into the hall. "Claire Lawson, correct." She nodded, breathless. "Who are you?" The man's face was unreadable beneath his helmet. "The people trying to clean up your mess." Before she could speak again, he pressed a small device against her wrist. It beeped once, scanning. The man's eyes widened slightly. "She's resonating." "Resonating?" Claire snapped. "What does that mean?" He looked at his partner. "She's keyed to the vault now. She's not just a breach, she's part of the system." Claire jerked her arm free. "You don't know what you're talking about." The hum intensified again, vibrating through the walls. The man raised his voice over the noise. "You need to come with us. Now." "Why?" "Because whatever's beneath this place just recognized you as its new operator." The sound of the hum spiked suddenly, rising into a sharp, almost human scream. The lights exploded overhead, raining glass across the hallway. The men dove for cover, radios blaring with static. Claire didn't wait. She ran. She sprinted down the hall toward the atrium, toward Evan. The noise followed her, chasing through the corridors like a storm of electricity and rage. When she reached the main floor, she saw him, curled beneath the broken fountain, eyes wide. He looked up as she grabbed him. "Mom, what's happening?" She pulled him close, whispering through the chaos, "We have to go, now." From behind them, one of the men shouted through the smoke and sparks, "Lawson, you can't outrun it. It's linked to you." Claire didn't turn back. She just ran, clutching Evan's hand as the hum roared to life beneath the floor, shaking the ground beneath their feet. And somewhere deep below, beneath the vault, the thing inside the core stirred for the first time in years, its light bleeding through the cracks, reaching for the woman who had set it free. The ground felt alive. Every tile beneath Claire's feet trembled as if the mall itself were breathing through the cracks, inhaling her fear and exhaling something darker. She and Evan sprinted through the darkened atrium, their footsteps echoing in waves that melted into the growing hum, reverberating through the air. Behind them came the shouts of the armed men, voices lost beneath the thunderous rhythm of machinery awakening. Red emergency lights flickered on one by one, staining the marble floors in blood. Colored pulses. "Mom," Evan cried, his voice cracking through the chaos. "Where are we going?" "Outside," she shouted, gripping his hand tighter. "We have to get out before—" Her words were swallowed by a deep mechanical groan that tore through the building, rattling the ceiling and sending shards of glass tumbling down from the skylight. They dove behind a row of rusted planters as debris rained down. When Claire looked up, the skylight itself had begun to warp, its metal frames twisting, bending as if reacting to invisible pressure from above. "Mom," Evan whispered, trembling, "it's coming from underneath." She followed his gaze. The fountain at the center of the mall, the one that had long dried up, was glowing. Not a soft shimmer this time, but a radiant, molten gold spilling through the cracks like veins of fire. The hum deepened. Louder, angrier, almost aware, Claire pulled Evan close. "Don't look at it." She shielded his eyes just as the glow erupted upward in a violent burst. The air cracked with energy, light flooding the atrium until everything became shadowless and unreal. For a moment, it felt like gravity itself vanished, like the whole building was being torn between time and space. Then, in an instant, the light collapsed. Silence followed, sharp and unnatural. Even the air seemed to pause. Claire blinked against the afterimage still burning in her vision. The glow was gone, but something new had taken its place. In the middle of the fountain, where the cracks had split wide open, a circular metal hatch had surfaced, engraved with the same sigil she'd seen in the ledger. The core had revealed itself. Evan tugged her sleeve, his voice small. "Mom, someone's in there." Claire froze. "What?" He pointed, and sure enough, faintly, through the haze of steam rising from the hatch, was the outline of a figure. Not walking, not running, rising, her pulse thudded in her ears. "Evan, get back." She shoved him behind a column just as the hatch twisted open with a sound like tearing metal. From within came a rush of cold air, thick with the stench of earth and ozone. And then, out of the pit, a hand emerged. It wasn't decayed. It was clean, pale, perfectly preserved, as though time hadn't touched it. A gold watch glinted on its wrist. Claire knew that watch. She'd seen it in a photograph in Hale's office. "Mr. Hale?" she whispered, horrified. The man who'd vanished in 2008 climbed out of the core, his movements smooth but wrong. He stood upright, his clothes half burned, his eyes vacant and white. For a long moment he said nothing, just turned slowly toward Claire, his head tilting like a puppet testing its strings. Then he spoke, his voice cold and calm. "You calm for a man risen from the dark." "You shouldn't have opened it, Claire." Her heart nearly stopped. "You're dead." His lips twitched into something that might have once been a smile. "I was." Behind him, the light from the pit pulsed again, casting shadows that moved even when he didn't. She backed away, gripping Evan's arm. "Stay behind me." Hale stepped closer, barefoot on the tile. Each step left faint golden footprints that faded after a second. His voice softened, almost mournful. "You think you freed something. You didn't. You just handed it a voice." "I don't understand," Claire whispered. He gestured to the walls around them. "This building was never a mall. It was a mask, a containment shell. I built it because I thought I could bury what we found. But the core, it adapts, it learns, and it needed someone new to bond with." The realization hit her like ice. "You mean me?" Hale nodded once, slow and deliberate. "It needed a signature, a mind it could survive through. You signed it when you touched the vault." Evan whimpered softly. "Mom, he's scaring me." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Why me?" "Because you were desperate enough to listen." Hale said, "That's how it begins. Desperation opens the door. Curiosity keeps it open." He took another step closer. The air around him shimmered faintly with gold, heat rising in visible waves. "You can't destroy it," he murmured, "but you can still contain it, if you're willing to pay the same price I did." Claire's voice trembled. "What price?" "Everything that makes you human." A sharp crack shattered the moment. Gunfire from the upper level. One of the armed men had returned, aiming down at Hale. "Don't move," he barked. But Hale only tilted his head toward the man, and in that instant the air rippled. The gunman screamed, dropping his weapon as golden light tore through his body like lightning. He convulsed, then fell still, his skin glowing faintly before turning gray as ash. Claire gasped, "Oh my God!" Hale looked back at her, unbothered. "You can't kill what's already part of the system." The hum grew louder now, violent, unstable. The walls shook as cracks spidered across the marble floor. Somewhere in the distance, metal supports screamed under invisible pressure. Evan clung to her. "Mom, what do we do?" She didn't know. For the first time, she truly didn't know. Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was trapped between the thing she'd unleashed and the thing it now wore. Hale's expression softened again, almost pitying. "You have one chance left. Seal the core before it stabilizes, or it'll spread beyond these walls." "How?" she demanded. He turned toward the fountain, where the pit still glowed faintly. "It'll show you how. It always does. But be careful what it takes in return." Then his voice began to distort, layered with static, glitching like an old transmission. His form flickered, fragments of his body blurring into waves of light. "It's waking up," he said, his tone fracturing. "I can't hold it anymore." "Hold what?" Claire shouted. Hale's face cracked into something inhuman, eyes shining white, mouth stretching into a soundless scream. The golden light surged around him, swallowing his body until there was nothing left but brilliance. Then he was gone. The hum stopped. The light vanished. The only sound was Evan's panicked breathing and the faint hiss of cooling air. Claire stumbled backward, pulling her son into her arms. "Mom," he whispered, shaking. Was he real? She looked toward the empty space where Hale had stood. The tiles where his footprints had burned were now cold and gray. "I don't know," she said softly, "but whatever he wasn't lying." A faint vibration rolled through the floor again, subtle but steady. The light beneath the cracks had dimmed, but it hadn't died. Claire turned toward the fountain. The hatch was still open, the pit yawning below like a mouth that refused to close, and from its depths came a single, slow whisper, one that didn't echo in the air but inside her mind, "Finish what he started." Her heart clenched. The hum began again, quieter this time, like the sound of blood rushing through her veins. She turned to Evan, gripping his shoulders. "Listen to me. Whatever happens next, You run when I say, understand? He nodded, trembling. Mom, what are you going to do? She looked toward the core, her face pale but fierce. I'm going to end this. As she stepped closer to the open hatch, the golden light stirred once more, rising to greet her like something that had been waiting all along. And in that quiet, electric glow, Silverwood Mall finally chose its new keeper. By dawn, Silverwood Mall no longer felt abandoned. It was awake, breathing through the cracks of its foundation, pulsing beneath the marble floors like veins of something alive. Claire could hear it even when she tried not to, the faint rhythmic hum that matched her heartbeat, whispering her name in tones too low for the air to carry. Evan hadn't slept. His small frame was wrapped in a blanket beside her, eyes fixed on the faint orange glow of the emergency lantern. He looked older now, his fear carving new lines into his young face. Claire's mind was fractured between exhaustion and fury. She had been lied to, used by forces that had seen her desperation as an opportunity. The government, Hale, the entity beneath the vault. They had all written her into a story that wasn't hers. But it was now. Outside, a single engine echoed through the stillness of morning. Claire stiffened. The sound was too smooth, too deliberate, not thunder, not the storm, a vehicle. She rose slowly and crept toward the glass doors at the front of the mall. The sky outside was bruised purple, the horizon sharp with fog. A convoy had arrived. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop at the base of the cracked entrance ramp. Their windows were tinted, their movements perfectly synchronized. Claire's breath caught. They're here. Evan appeared beside her, voice trembling. Who? She stared through the fractured glass. The people who think they still own this place. The car doors opened almost in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out, calm, silent, carrying briefcases and sidearms. They moved with the precision of people who didn't have to explain themselves. The last door opened more slowly, and from it stepped a tall man with silver hair slicked neatly back, a sharp coat untouched by the wind. He didn't look like a soldier, he looked like a banker, but the way the other men deferred to him made her skin crawl. She whispered, "That's not a government agent, that's a broker." They approached the entrance. Claire and Evan ducked behind a column as one of the men struck the glass with the butt of his gun. It cracked instantly, a spiderweb pattern spreading across the door. Another man followed with a crowbar. Within seconds, the main doors collapsed inward, shards scattering across the floor. The sound reverberated through the atrium like the first note of war. The silver-haired man stepped inside, his gaze sweeping across the dark expanse. His shoes crunched over broken glass, deliberate and unhurried. He spoke to no one, but his presence filled the entire hall. Claire could feel it, the same pull she'd felt from the core, only colder, human, made. The man looked around as though returning to a property he'd simply left unattended. "MS. Lawson," he called out, voice smooth as glass. "You've made quite a mess of our investment." Claire flinched. His tone was almost casual, as if this were a polite business meeting instead of an intrusion. He continued walking, his voice carrying. "You see, this mall was never for sale. That auction listing was an oversight. But then you, a woman of limited means, arrived and paid precisely what we needed to trigger the reactivation protocol." Almost poetic. Claire's pulse thundered. He knew everything. Evan whispered, "Mom, we have to go." She shook her head, whispering back, "If we run, they'll follow us. If we hide, they'll burn it down." The silver-haired man stopped near the fount, in the same place where Hale had vanished in a storm of light just hours before. He looked down at the cracked marble, running a gloved hand across it. "You did open it," he said softly. "I can feel it." One of his men spoke up from behind him. "Sir, the containment readings are spiking again." "Good," the man replied, smiling faintly. "That means she's nearby." Claire's heart pounded. She took a slow step back, pulling Evan with her, but as she did, a flashlight beam cut through the dark, landing squarely on her face. "Over here," a guard shouted. The silver-haired man turned toward her, expression calm, almost amused. "Ms. Lawson." Claire stepped out from behind the column, her breath sharp and visible in the cold air. "You have no right to be here." "Oh, but I do," he said. "You signed over ownership when you made contact with the vault. You became part of the asset. You're standing on government property, holding something far more valuable than you can comprehend." Claire's jaw tightened. "It's not an asset. It's alive." That made him smile. So was Hale. The men began to fan out, forming a half-circle around her and Evan. Claire positioned herself between them instinctively. "Let the boy go," the man said. "He's irrelevant to the sequence. We only need you. Stay behind me." She whispered to Evan, then louder, "You'll have to kill me first." "That won't be necessary," he said smoothly. "The Corps prefers living conduits. Dead ones don't resonate." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a sleek, tablet-sized device. Its screen flickered with gold, the same pulse. "You feel it, don't you? The pull, it's responding to you even now. That hum, you can't escape its synchronization. You are the bridge." Claire shook her head. "I won't be part of it." "You already are," he said. "And if you don't cooperate, the containment will collapse, and that thing beneath us won't just wake. It will migrate." The floor beneath them trembled, faint at first, then harder. Dust rained from the skylight above. The Corps was listening. Claire's voice broke. "You don't understand. It's not controllable." "Everything is controllable," the man replied softly, "if you're willing to lose enough." The tremor turned into a violent quake. One of the guards stumbled, shouting, "Sir, it's rising again." "We have seconds." The silver-haired man's comm faltered. His eyes darted toward the floor as the golden cracks reappeared, snaking outward from the fountain. "Contain it," he barked. The men scrambled, setting up small metallic boxes that hummed with electrical energy. Claire recognized the frequency. It was the same pitch that echoed through the vault before the lights died. The air grew dense, vibrating with static. The hum became a roar. Evan covered his ears, crying out, "Mom, make it stop." Claire dropped to her knees, clutching him tightly. Her voice was lost in the storm of sound. The gold light burst upward again, blinding, consuming everything in its path. Through the glare, she saw the silver-haired man standing firm, unflinching, his device glowing in rhythm with the core. He smiled through the chaos. "This is it," he shouted over the noise. "This is rebirth." Claire screamed back, "No, it's feeding." The light swallowed them whole. When the brilliance faded, the men were gone. The SUV outside were gone. The air hung thick and motionless, the floor scorched black where they'd stood. Only Claire and Evan remained, alive but trembling. She stared at the smoking crater where the fountain once stood, the pulse still faint but steady beneath the ruin. Whatever she had unleashed had chosen sides, and this time it had protected her. As the silence returned to Silverwood, Claire realized something irreversible had shifted. The core no longer belonged to its creators. It belonged to her. The silence that followed was unbearable, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that throbbed, that listened back. The air smelled of ozone and smoke, thick with the metallic tang of electricity. Claire stood frozen, the faint shimmer of gold still pulsing beneath her boots, slow and deliberate, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Evan trembled beside her, clutching her coat. His voice cracked. "Mom, where did they go?" Claire's breath came in shallow gasps. She turned toward the fount, in the blackened crater that still hissed with vapor. The men who had surrounded them were gone. No bodies, no trace, just ash scattered like fine dust across the marble. They're gone, she whispered, all of them. Her mind raced, not gone as in dead, gone as in taken. The core had done something deliberate. It hadn't lashed out blindly. It had responded to them, to their machines, to the device in the silver-haired man's hand. It had chosen. She stepped closer to the crater. The heat still radiated from it, but she couldn't look away. The center glowed faintly, like molten glass cooling beneath the surface. She could see her reflection in it, warped, faintly gold, her eyes shining with an unnatural light. "Mom," Evan said, voice shaking. "You're glowing." She looked down at her hands. The veins beneath her skin shimmered faintly gold for a moment before fading. She clenched her fists, horrified. "No, no, no, no." The hum returned, gentle this time, almost soothing. It whispered through the walls like a sigh. "You are part of it now." The voice wasn't outside anymore. It was inside her, a vibration in her bones, a whisper behind her heartbeat. Claire stumbled backward, pressing her palms against her ears. "Get out of my head." Evan clutched her arm, terrified. "Mom, what's happening to you?" She forced herself to breathe, to steady her shaking. "It's okay," she said, lying. "It's okay, honey. We just have to figure it out." But deep inside, she knew the truth. Hale had warned her. The silver-haired man had confirmed it. The core needed a conduit, someone alive to stabilize it, to feed its awareness. It had Hale once. Now it had her. A faint hum of static interrupted her thoughts. Somewhere nearby, a small light flickered. The red stand, by dot of a security camera. It shouldn't have been working. The power was gone. But one by one, more lights blinked on across the atrium. Cameras. Dozens of them, all turning, all focusing on her. The monitors in the security office roared to life upstairs. Through the broken door, she could see them flickering, displaying her image from every angle, her face on every screen. Evan gasped, "Mom, it's watching us." Claire swallowed hard. "No, it's watching me." The speakers in the walls crackled, alive again for the first time in years. Then, through the static, a familiar voice whispered, smooth, confident, echoing from memory. "Authorization, Hale. Sigma. Re-established." Her stomach turned cold. It was the silver-haired man's voice, but he was gone. She stepped closer to the fountain, staring into the glowing surface. "Where are you?" she demanded. The voice came again, distorted now, layered with static, not gone, not destroyed, integrated. The lights above her flickered once, twice, then stabilized, casting the atrium in a golden hue. The reflection in the crater changed. It wasn't hers anymore, it was his. The silver-haired man's face formed in the liquid glow, rippling like molten glass. His expression was calm, his voice colder than before. "You thought you could contain the core by refusing it, Ms. Lawson. But the moment it touched you, it found its perfect host." Claire's voice broke. "I'm not your experiment." "You're not," he replied. "You're its evolution." The gold light flared, reaching toward her like tendrils of liquid fire. She stepped back, shielding Evan behind her. "What do you want?" she screamed. "Completion." The voice said, "You unlocked what Hale began. He built the vault, you became it." The tendrils pulsed again, coiling in the air like living smoke. Evan clung to her leg, sobbing, "Make it stop. Please make it stop." Claire wrapped her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm trying, baby, I'm trying." The voice softened, almost compassionate. "You don't need to fight it. You've already proven yourself worthy. Together we can finish the sequence. We can restore balance." She gritted her teeth. "By killing people, by turning this place into a graveyard, by cleansing it." The voice replied, "By completing the design." Something shifted behind them. A low metallic groan echoed from the far end of the mall. The shutters of the old stores were opening, one after another, slow and deliberate. Claire turned. "No." Inside each dark storefront, lights flickered on soft, golden, rhythmic. The mannequins inside the display windows began to move. Slowly, jerky at first, then smoother, synchronized to the same pulse running through the walls. Evan screamed, "Mom!" Claire grabbed his hand, "Run!" They sprinted down the hall as the mannequins stepped out of the stores, lifeless faces turning toward them, movements mechanical yet eerily human. Their empty eyes glowed faint gold. "Don't look back," Claire shouted. The hum roared through the building now, deafening, rattling the glass. Every light flashed in rhythm, every speaker vibrating with overlapping voices. Hale, the silver-haired man, her own whispers, all tangled into one impossible chorus. The core is awake. Containment breached. Lawson's sequence initiated. She and Evan reached the maintenance corridor, slamming the door behind them. Her hands shook as she threw the bolt into place. The mannequins outside pressed against the glass, their fingers leaving streaks of gold across the window. Evan sobbed into her shoulder. "Mom, it's all alive." She held him tighter, her voice shaking. "It's not alive, sweetheart. It's remembering." The hum grew louder, angrier. The lights flickered red, then gold again. Claire turned back toward the basement door, the one that led to the vault. The air around it shimmered faintly. She understood now. The core wasn't trying to destroy them all. It was trying to rebuild it, to reshape it in its own image, using her as the center. But if she was the key, then she could also be the lock. She took a deep breath. "Evan," she said softly, "you have to do something for me." He looked up, tears streaking his face. "What, when I tell you to run? You don't stop. You hear me. You go. You don't look back." His lip trembled. "No, Mom, you can't. Promise me." He nodded slowly, tears falling. She cupped his face with both hands, kissing his forehead. "I love you more than anything. Always remember that." Then she turned toward the basement door. The hum vibrated through her chest, almost welcoming. The golden light along the floor brightened as she approached, forming a path that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She whispered, "All right, let's finish this." And as she stepped through the doorway, the glow swallowed her whole, sealing the world behind her in a wall of living gold. Somewhere deep below, the core answered with a sound that wasn't quite a hum anymore. It was breathing, it was waiting, and it knew her name. The descent felt endless. Claire moved through the spiral corridor beneath silver, wood like a ghost, every step echoing through the metallic throat of the earth. The golden light that had swallowed her upstairs now pulsed faintly along the walls, illuminating veins of crystal and metal that seemed to grow like roots. The deeper she went, the warmer it became, humid, alive, breathing. The hum was softer here, but closer, no longer around her, but within her. Every heartbeat felt synchronized to it, each pulse of her blood answering some hidden rhythm below. Behind her, the heavy vault door sealed shut with a deep clang, cutting off the world above. There was no going back now. She whispered into the silence, her voice trembling but steady. "You wanted me here. I'm here. Show me what you are." The corridor opened into a massive chamber. She stopped at its edge, breath catching in her throat. It wasn't man-made. The walls were smooth, curved like the inside of a vast ribcage. Strange markings spiraled upward, glowing faintly gold, ancient and mathematical all at once. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, sleek, metallic, humming with energy. Above it, suspended in the air, floated a sphere of light. It was hypnotic, fluid yet solid, gold yet translucent. Inside it, she could see shifting shape, structures, fragments, movements that felt almost like memories. Her voice came out, barely a whisper. "You're the core." The light shimmered in response. "You see, at last." The words weren't heard. They vibrated directly through her body. It wasn't a sound. It was understanding translated into sensation. Claire swallowed hard. "What are you?" "I am what they built to contain what they could not name." She stepped closer, her fear thinning into awe. "You were never gold, never treasure. They called me currency because they worshipped value, but I am not theirs to own. Her mind raced. Then, what did Hale build the vault for? The sphere pulsed brighter, the markings along the walls reacting. Hale believed he was preserving wealth. In truth, he was preserving consequence. They stole from nations, buried their sins, and fed me power, energy, memory. Every lie has weight, and I was built to carry it. Claire's chest tightened. $450 million. That's what they said you held, not money. Energy once bound to gold, stripped of matter. 450 million units of guilt, fear, greed. She trembled. You're saying the fortune was never real. It was real enough to destroy them. She stumbled back, her mind flashing through everything. The ledgers, the coded accounts, the glowing vault, the missing men. All of it led here. Hale hadn't hidden a treasure. He had imprisoned the collective corruption of the men who built Silverwood, a living consequence of greed turned sentient. The core flickered again, softer now. And now you carry me. Claire froze. What? When you touched the vault, you completed the circuit, the human element, you gave me empathy, the one thing they never had. Her hands shook. You mean, I'm part of you. You are balance. The light without purpose is chaos. You give it meaning. Her mind reeled. I don't want this. I don't want to be your conduit. And yet, you stayed. You listened. You came back. Every human who fears power runs from it. But you came toward it. The light dimmed for a moment, almost tenderly. That is why you were chosen. She sank to her knees, covering her face. Tears stung her eyes. I'm just a mother trying to keep her son alive. I didn't choose this. Every choice you've made has brought you here, not for wealth, not for survival, but for redemption. Her breath hitched. Redemption. The walls around her flickered with images, memories not her own. Men in suits signing papers, gold bars loaded into crates, families evicted from their homes, Hale staring into the core for the last time before the lights went dark, and finally Claire herself, standing in the atrium, holding her son's hand, surrounded by ruin and courage. Greed built me, you will free me. She looked up through her tears. How reveal the truth? They will come for what they think I am. Show them what I became. Her heart pounded. The men outside, they're still alive, aren't they? Alive but consumed. Their forms are data now, patterns of their intent, but they can be seen. Claire's voice trembled. You want me to expose them? The world must see what power really costs. She stood slowly, her strength returning through the trembling. The light around her steadied, responding to her heartbeat. The warmth that had terrified her now felt familiar. You want me to show the world what's hidden here? She said quietly. You want the truth to live where the lies were buried? Yes. She nodded, tears streaking her face but her voice firm now. Then help me do it. The core brightened, flooding the chamber in gold so intense it erased shadow. For a heartbeat, she felt suspended, weightless, surrounded by warmth and light that wasn't hers but through her. It filled her chest, her hands, her mind. Then take what I am, and make them remember. When the light dimmed again, she found herself standing at the edge of the chamber, the glow fading beneath her skin. Her reflection in the metal surface still shimmered faintly gold, but now, behind her eyes, there was understanding. She turned toward the tunnel that led back to the surface. The hum was no longer a threat. It was a promise. Claire whispered into the dark, her voice steady and sure. Time to bring you into the light. And as she began her ascent back to the world above, the core pulsed once more, a heartbeat of truth echoing through the bones of Silverwood Mall. The climb back to the surface was not silent. It was alive. The hum that once terrified Claire now pulsed with rhythm and intent, guiding her ascent. The tunnels shimmered faintly gold, like veins lighting up in response to her heartbeat. She wasn't walking through the mall anymore. She was walking through a living history, through the spine of the machine that had devoured men and money for decades. When she emerged into the lower atrium, the storm had broken open again. Rainwater poured through the shattered skylights, splashing across the marble, hissing when it touched the faintly glowing cracks in the floor. Evan was waiting. He stood where she'd left him, trembling but unhurt, his small hands clenched around the straps of his backpack. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Mom," Claire looked down at herself. The faint golden shimmer still traced her skin, pulsing beneath the surface like liquid light. She forced a shaky smile. "It's okay, honey, it's still me." He shook his head slowly, stepping closer. "You're glowing, I know." Her voice cracked, heavy with emotion. "But it's not hurting me anymore." The hum in the walls deepened slightly, like the core was listening. Calm, patient, protective. Claire knelt and held Evan close, pressing her forehead to his. "We're almost done," she whispered. "I know what it is now. I know what they tried to hide." He clung to her. "Can we go home after?" "Yes," she said softly. "But first, I have to show the world what's underneath all this." Lightning flickered through the broken ceiling, illuminating the mall's vast interior. The collapsed fountain, the cracked glass, the corridors warped by time. It all looked like the bones of something ancient pretending to be human architecture. Claire rose, the hum following her movements like breath. She walked toward the old management office, the same room where she'd once found the ledgers. The door, once locked, now slid open by itself. Inside, the monitors had come alive. Every screen glowed with that same golden pulse, showing not just camera feeds from the mall, but fragments of something else: faces, documents, numbers, names, the stolen accounts, the shell companies. The fraud that had financed Silverwood's creation. It was all there, the proof. Claire's hands trembled as she approached the console. "You've been keeping this," she murmured. The core's voice vibrated softly through the air, preserved, recorded, waiting for someone who could see. She swallowed hard. "You mean Hale? Hale built the walls but feared what they held. You, Claire Lawson, built nothing, but you are not afraid to open them." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're giving me all of it. The truth. It is not mine to keep. It was never theirs to own." Claire turned to the dusty computer terminal and brushed her fingers across the keyboard. The screens flickered, showing 1,000 records at once. C-mails, financial transfers, classified contracts, all connecting the same network of names she'd seen in the ledger. She saw the truth for the first time. The core wasn't supernatural. It was the byproduct of greed itself. A physical system built to store not gold, but energy derived from manipulation. Every stolen cent converted into data and power, compressed until it formed awareness. It wasn't born of evil, it was born of imbalance. Claire's voice trembled. "You were built from everything people did wrong, and now you just exist. I exist because they never stopped taking." Lightning cracked outside, shaking the floor. One of the monitors exploded in a shower of sparks, but the others stayed steady, glowing brighter. "They will come again, Claire. They always do." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "Not this time. I'll expose it before they bury it again. If you do, you will destroy yourself." She looked toward the ceiling, where the light flickered like trapped sunlight. "If I don't, it destroys everyone else." The core didn't reply. It simply pulsed once, brighter, like a heartbeat of approval. Claire grabbed a working camera from the office shelf, fold, dusty, but intact. She aimed it at the screens, recording every file, every name, every detail of the system that had destroyed Silverwood's soul. Evan watched from the doorway, whispering, "Mom, what are you doing?" "Making sure they can't erase this," she said, her voice steady. "Not this time." She recorded until the final monitor burned out, sparks fading into smoke. Then she turned off the camera, clutching it to her chest like a relic. Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the ground. The hum beneath her feet grew louder again, not violent, but urgent. "They are near." Claire looked at the ruined entrance and saw faint headlights cutting through the rain. More vehicles, more men. She tightened her grip on the camera. Then we finish it here. You cannot fight them, Claire. Watch me. She stepped out into the atrium as the SUV skidded to a stop outside. Doors slammed. Boots hit wet concrete. Voices shouted orders. They were faster this time. Dozens of them, heavily armed. The hum of the Corps rose to meet them. The light beneath the cracks intensified, spilling across the floor in waves of molten gold. The air shimmered with static. The first man to cross the threshold stopped mid-step, staring down in horror as his boots sank slightly into the glowing cracks. Then the light surged upward, swallowing him in silence. Panic erupted. The others opened fire, bullets tearing through the air, ricocheting off invisible barriers as the mall itself responded, sealing its entrances with collapsing debris and metallic tendrils that grew from the walls like roots. Evan screamed. Claire pushed him behind a column. Stay down. The Corps' voice thundered through her skull. Stop them, or they will take me again. She pressed her hands against the floor, the glow beneath her skin sinking with the golden cracks. Energy pulsed through her palms, through the ground. The marble rippled like water. Men screamed as the floor opened beneath them. The golden light poured upward again, flooding the room like a tidal wave of brilliance. Claire's voice broke through the chaos. Enough. The light stopped mid-surge, frozen, suspended in the air like liquid glass. The entire mall fell silent. The surviving men stared at her, terrified. The glow in her veins pulsed brighter. Leave, she said, her voice carrying like thunder. Tell them what's buried here. Tell them to never come back. The men backed away slowly, dragging their injured comrades. No one dared fire again. As the SUV retreated into the storm, Claire collapsed to her knees, shaking. The golden light dimmed. Evan ran to her, crying, "Mom, Mom." She pulled him into her arms, whispering through ragged breaths. "It's okay. It's okay. It's done." "No." The Corps whispered softly within her. "Now it begins." She lifted her head, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "What do you mean? You have freed the truth, but truth must live somewhere. You are its vessel now. You are its keeper." She swallowed hard, tears mixing with rain. "Then I'll keep it safe, until they come again." Claire looked around the ruined atrium, the shattered glass, the molten cracks, the ghostly silence, and nodded. "Then I'll be waiting." As lightning flashed through the fractured skylight, Silverwood Mall stood still once more, no longer a monument to greed, but a living vault of truth. And within its golden heart, Claire Lawson's pulse beat in perfect rhythm with the Corps. Night dropped over Silverwood like a curtain of ash. The rain had returned, heavy and relentless, hammering against the broken glass ceiling until every sound in the mall blurred into one. The storm above and the hum below merging into a single heartbeat of chaos. Claire moved like a shadow through the wreckage, clutching Evan's hand tightly. The glow in her veins had dimmed, but it was still there, faint beneath her skin, an ember of the Corps' power she could neither reject nor understand. Every time her pulse quickened, the cracks in the marble seemed to breathe with her. She whispered, "Stay close, no matter what." "Do you understand?" Evan nodded, his small face pale in the dim light. "I'm not leaving you." Thunder rolled through the glass dome, followed by the distant growl of engines. Claire froze. Headlights cut through the fog outside the main entrance. Too many to count. They were back. And this time they'd brought an army. The convoy stopped in formation, doors flying open in synchronized precision. Dozens of men poured out, armored, armed, moving with military efficiency. Floodlights lit up the front of the mall, piercing through the rain. Claire and Evan ducked behind an overturned kiosk as the first voice barked through a loudspeaker. "This is a government containment operation. All civilians must surrender immediately. Failure to comply will result in force. Evan looked up at her. They're going to hurt you, Mom. Claire exhaled slowly, her fear hardening into resolve. They'll try. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the old security radio she'd scavenged from the office. The frequency was still alive, crackling faintly with static from the core's energy. She pressed the button. "This is Claire Lawson," she said, her voice steady but cold. "You think you can take what's down here? You think you can own it again? You'll never control it." For a moment, only static replied. Then a calm, familiar voice came through. "The silver-haired man, M.S. Lawson, you survived. I'm impressed." Her jaw clenched. "I saw what it did to you." "No," he said softly. "You saw what it made of me." His voice carried the faint mechanical distortion of something no longer entirely human. "You misunderstand the purpose, Claire. The core isn't destruction. It's rebirth. You've proven compatibility. Join us. We can make you part of the new design." Claire laughed bitterly. "You mean turn me into what you are, into what you were always meant to be?" The radio went dead. Outside, floodlights cut across the atrium, scanning. Men advanced in formation, their boots pounding in rhythm with the thunder. They carried rifles glowing faintly blue, prototype containment weapons, humming with electrical charge. Claire crouched beside Evan. "When I say run, you head for the south corridor. There's an emergency hatch behind the service doors. It leads outside." He shook his head violently. "No, I'm not leaving." She took his face in her hands, her eyes fierce. "You have to, Evan. If I don't stop them, this place will consume everything. Do you hear me? Everything." His lip quivered. "You said we'd go home." Her voice broke. "We will, but first I have to make sure there's still a world left to go home to." Before he could answer, a sharp blast of sound shattered the silence, a warning shot. Then, through the fog, came the order: breach the main doors. The explosion tore through the front entrance, sending shards of glass and debris flying. Claire threw herself over Evan as the blast wave rippled through the atrium. The lights flickered, and for a split second the core responded. The cracks on the floor ignited gold, flaring upward like lightning trapped under the marble. The men outside froze, shielding their faces as the light blinded them. Then the ground rumbled. Claire rose slowly, her hands trembling. The hum roared through the air again, louder than thunder, vibrating everything in sight. The core wasn't asleep anymore. It was angry. The soldiers opened fire. Bullets hit invisible walls midair, ricocheting harmlessly into the shadows. The sound of gunfire mixed with the storm's fury, echoing through the vast hall like a war inside a cathedral. Claire moved quickly, pulling Evan toward the service hallway. "Go." He hesitated. "Mom, now." He ran. She turned to face the soldiers charging through the main entrance, her body trembling with adrenaline and power. She didn't know how she would stop them, only that she had to. The nearest soldier aimed his weapon, and the world erupted in light. A surge of energy burst from beneath Claire's feet, radiating outward in concentric rings. The floor split open, sending men flying backward. The air shimmered gold, warping like heat. When the glow dimmed, Claire stood in the center of the atrium, surrounded by chaos, her silhouette outlined in gold. The soldiers hesitated, their confidence cracking. One whispered into his comms, "She's resonating. She's linked to it." The silver-haired man's voice crackled through their radios again, colder than ever. "Do not harm her. She is the key." The men regrouped, advancing cautiously. Claire's voice rang out over the hum, strong and defiant. "You don't understand what you're fighting for. This place isn't a weapon. It's a warning. Contain her." The voice barked. They charged, Claire raised her hands instinctively, and the golden light erupted again, forming a barrier that deflected the bullets. The sound was deafening. Sparks rained down as energy collided with metal. She could feel the core moving through her now, not controlling her, but amplifying her will. The air vibrated with its voice. Protect the vessel. Columns cracked, the floor heaved, the storm outside seemed to answer, lightning illuminating the shattered skylight. Claire took a step forward. The glow in her eyes matched the pulse beneath the floor. You wanted power, she said, voice trembling but steady. Now you'll see what it costs. She brought her hands together, and the energy surged outward like a tidal wave, shattering glass, bending steel, knocking the soldiers off their feet. Evan watched from the far end of the hall, tears streaming down his face, as his mother stood alone in the golden storm, fighting an army that had no idea what it had awakened. The core's hum rose into a crescendo, shaking the foundations of Silverwood Mall. And as the floodlights outside circuited one by one, the battle for control of the core, the battle for truth itself, had finally begun. The storm outside had turned into a war drum, pounding across the shattered roof as if the heavens themselves were warning what came next. Claire stood in the golden glow of the atrium, breathing, shaking, alive. The hum of the core now thrummed through every cell of her body, an electric river that made the air around her shimmer. She could feel the building thinking. Each vibration through the floor was like the beat of a colossal heart. Each flicker of light, a breath, and all of it was waiting for her command. Evan's voice pierced through the roaring storm. "Mom, they're coming through the other side." Claire turned. More soldiers poured in through the eastern corridor, weapons raised, visors glowing with digital readouts. These weren't the same men as before. They moved faster, spoke less, and carried something heavier than fear in their voices. The voice of the silver-haired man boomed through their earpieces, echoing across the intercom system. "Do not engage her emotionally. She is the core's vessel now. Subdue, don't destroy." Claire clenched her fists. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. "You can't control what you don't understand." But they didn't listen. They raised their weapons, and the air sizzled with the sound of charging electricity. The first bolt struck her chest, blue energy arcing through her body. Evan screamed, but instead of falling, Claire absorbed it. The energy vanished into her skin, the glow in her veins blazing like molten gold. The soldiers hesitated. Then she opened her eyes. They weren't blue anymore. They burned pure, incandescent gold. The hum beneath the floor turned into a roar. The marble around her fractured, splitting into spirals that spun outward. From the cracks, liquid light rose in streams, coiling through the air like serpents. "Mom," Evan whispered, terrified and awestruck. Claire's voice was calm now, otherworldly. "Stay behind me." She raised her hand. The golden light followed, forming a wave that surged forward. The soldiers fired again, but the bullets evaporated midair, melting into dust before reaching her. The golden wave struck them like wind. No impact, no fire, just an overwhelming silence. When the light faded, the men were gone. Only their weapons remained, glowing faintly before disintegrating into the floor. The mall went still again. Evan's small hand gripped hers. "What's happening to you?" Claire looked down at him. The glow was fading now, her eyes soft again, human for a moment. "I don't know, but I can feel everything, the walls, the air, the storm, it's all connected. You are the conduit," whispered the voice of the core inside her. "Balance must be restored." Her breath trembled. "Then tell me how. Stop the corruption that built me." She turned toward the shattered monitors across the atrium. Through the flickering static, she saw faces again. Boardrooms, men in suits, the investors who had profited from Silverwood's creation. Some were watching live feeds, others pre-recorded warnings. They were the owners the man had spoken about, the network behind the entire conspiracy. She realized then the siege wasn't just happening here, it was everywhere. The core was connected to every system they had ever built, every server, every network they had used to hide their crimes. And now, through her, it could show the world, but that meant she had to open it completely. The core pulsed once. Freedom costs sacrifice. Claire whispered, "What will it take?" The hum deepened, almost mournful. She stared at the golden cracks under her feet, feeling their warmth rise through her body. A part of her already knew the truth. Every time she'd used its power, it had taken a little piece of her. The fear, the anger, the pain, but also her humanity. If she gave it everything, it would burn through her like light through glass. Evan tugged her sleeve. "Mom, no. Please, let's go. We can leave this place." She knelt, holding his face with trembling hands. "I can't, sweetheart. If I leave, they'll just come again. If I stop now, this never ends." His voice cracked. "But you'll die." She smiled faintly, tears glinting in the golden light. "Maybe, but you'll live. That's enough for me." The walls shook again. Outside, thunder rolled louder, closer. The storm was no longer just weather. It was resonance. The core was calling through the sky itself. She stood, every movement deliberate. The light beneath her feet brightened, following her steps toward the center of the atrium where the fountain had once stood. The crater glowed like an open wound, waiting. She turned to Evan one last time. "Run, don't look back." He shook his head violently, sobbing. "No, Mom, please, go." She shouted, the air trembling with her voice. Evan's cries echoed as he ran toward the south corridor, disappearing into the shadows. Claire closed her eyes, feeling the hum rise through her chest. The core's presence filled her mind completely now. No longer a voice, but a symphony of millions. Every lie, every crime, every buried truth flowed through her like fire. The world above them all flickered. City grids pulsed, power lines glowed, satellite feeds spiked with interference. Across the horizon, lights went out, then flared again in gold. "You cannot destroy them," the core whispered, "but you can reveal them." She spread her arms wide, tears streaming down her face, "Then show them everything." The golden light exploded upward, ripping through the roof of Silverwood Mall in a column of pure brilliance. It pierced the clouds, turning night into day. All over the city, screens flickered on, phones, televisions, billboards, displaying the truth. Every secret, every stolen dollar, every name behind the conspiracy that had built Silverwood and buried its sins. For the first time, the core wasn't hidden underground. It was everywhere. Claire screamed as the light poured through her, burning brighter than any storm, brighter than any sun. The ground cracked, the building shuddered, and the hum reached a deafening pitch that split the sky. Then, silence, the storm broke. Rain poured through the shattered ceiling, hissing against the molten gold cooling in the cracks. The air smelled of ozone and rain. When the dust settled, the mall was quiet again, dead still, yet peaceful. The golden glow had dimmed, and in the center of the ruin, Claire Lawson lay motionless, her eyes closed, a faint smile frozen on her face. Her hands rested against the floor where the last of the core's light pulsed gently, like the final heartbeat of a dying sun. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The world was waking up to what she had done, and as dawn crept across the horizon, Silverwood Mall stood as both grave and monument, a place where greed met truth, and a mother's love became the light that saved the world. Dawn bled softly over the ruins of Silverwood Mall. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray stillness, broken only by the sound of dripping water, and the low hiss of steam rising from the cracks in the floor. The air smelled of metal, rain, and something faintly electric, like the aftermath of a thunderstrike. The once grand atrium was unrecognizable. Shattered beams jutted from the wreckage like bones through flesh, and the marble floor was veined with cooling rivers of gold. At the center of it all, Claire Lawson lay still beneath the fractured skylight, her body surrounded by faintly glowing light. Evan stumbled through the smoke, his small frame trembling as he called out again and again. "Mom, Mom," his voice echoed through the empty corridors, bouncing off glass and silence. He tripped over debris, scraped his knees, but kept going, driven by something more powerful than fear. When he reached her, he dropped to his knees, shaking her shoulders gently. "Please wake up, please." Her eyelids fluttered. "Mom," she groaned softly, her voice weak but real. "Evan." He broke into tears, throwing his arms around her. "I thought you were gone." She coughed, smiling faintly despite the pain that laced through her every movement. "Not yet," she whispered. The golden light beneath her dimmed slightly, flickering like a dying candle. The hum of the core had changed. It wasn't gone, but quieter now, subdued as if it, too, was resting. Claire sat up slowly, wincing as she looked around. The destruction stretched as far as she could see. The roof was gone, the offices collapsed, the escalators twisted and torn. But above it all, the light of morning poured through the broken glass, soft, pure, untouched. For the first time the mall felt clean. Evan wiped his face, looking at her with wide eyes. "You did it, didn't you? You stopped it." Claire looked down at her hands. The gold that had once burned beneath her skin was fading now, leaving only faint, branching scars, like lightning frozen in flesh. "No," she said softly, "I didn't stop it. I just gave it what it wanted." He frowned. "What did it want?" She met his gaze, eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "To be seen." For a long moment, they sat in silence as the wind moved through the ruins. The city in the distance was waking. Sirens, voices, the faint hum of electricity returning after a blackout that had covered miles. On the horizon, helicopters circled, news crews, rescue teams. The world had seen the golden light that tore through the clouds, and now they were coming to find its source. Claire pulled Evan closer. "They'll come soon," she said, "and when they do, they'll want answers." "Are you gonna tell them?" She smiled faintly. "Not all of it." He looked confused. "But you said you wanted to show the truth." "I did," she said, brushing his hair back gently. The core already showed them what they needed to see. The rest, the human part of it, that's ours to keep. A faint vibration rippled beneath the floor. Claire looked down. The cracks of gold were sealing themselves, cooling into smooth, glass-like lines. The core was withdrawing, going dormant again, but not gone. Its voice, faint as breath, whispered through her mind one last time. "Balance restored. The choice is yours." She whispered back, "I already made it." The air fell silent again. Moments later, the first rescue team breached the outer doors. Voices echoed through the shattered halls, orders, footsteps, disbelief. "Over here, we've got survivors." Claire squinted as flashlights cut through the smoke. Two responders rushed forward, their boots crunching on debris. "Ma'am, are you injured?" She nodded weakly, "Just tired." One of them glanced around the wreckage, eyes wide. What the hell happened here? Claire looked up toward the broken ceiling, where sunlight streamed in through the last remnants of rain. "A storm," she said quietly, "and something that needed to end." The medic helped her to her feet. "You're lucky to be alive." She smiled faintly, her gaze distant. Luck had nothing to do with it. As they led her and Evan toward the emergency tents outside, she turned back for one last look at Silverwood Mall. The light inside was gone, replaced by shadow, but in the deepest cracks of the marble, she could still see faint traces of gold, not burning, just waiting. Outside, The world was chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and drones hovered overhead. But Claire ignored them all. She stood barefoot on the wet concrete, staring at the horizon as dawn spread like fire over the city. Evan tugged her hand. "Mom," she looked down, smiling softly. "Yeah, sweetheart, what happens now?" She exhaled, her voice calm, resolute. "Now, we make sure no one forgets what this place really was." Behind her, a distant rumble shook the ground, the sound of the remaining structure collapsing in on itself. The last piece of Silverwood Mall crumbled into dust, sending one final plume of smoke into the morning air. Claire didn't flinch. She watched it fall, then whispered under her breath, "Good. Bye." Evan slipped his hand into hers. "Can we go home now?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yeah, baby, let's go home." As they walked toward the waiting ambulances, a news drone hovered above, capturing the ruins from high above, the golden veins still faintly glowing beneath the rubble, spreading out like roots across the land. And though the world would never understand what truly happened beneath Silverwood Mall, Claire Lawson did. She hadn't just uncovered a fortune, she'd uncovered a truth, and made the only choice that mattered. Sometimes redemption doesn't come from what you take, but from what you're willing to let go. Hours later, the world knew her name, Claire Lawson, the woman who survived the fall of Silverwood Mall. The mother who walked out of gold, lit ruins with the proof of a conspiracy buried beneath 15 years of dust. The footage she'd captured, her trembling hands, the faint hum of the core behind her voice, had spread faster than anyone could contain it. But the truth wasn't the story. She was. News anchors called her a whistleblower, a miracle, a martyr. The government called her a destabilizing influence. None of them knew the full truth. None of them knew the core still lived inside her, quietly pulsing beneath her skin like a second heart. Now, in the stillness of an unmarked hospital room, she sat by the window, staring out at the sunrise. The light was soft and white, not gold. Clean, human. Evan slept on the couch across the room, his chest rising and falling peacefully. Claire touched her wrist where the faint glow still traced her veins. It was fading each day, but it never vanished. A reminder, a warning, a heartbeat. She whispered, "I made the right choice, didn't I?" The voice that once thundered through her mind now answered only as a whisper beneath her pulse. "You chose balance." She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Then why does it still hurt? Because truth is never painless. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the small camera resting on her nightstand. And the same one that had recorded everything. Its lens was cracked, but it still worked. The footage inside was enough to change everything again, to burn the world clean or watch it fall apart. She had a choice. Release the full truth or let the fragments already out there stand as legend. If she exposed it all, she'd prove what Silverwood really was, an experiment in greed turned divine punishment. But the world wouldn't heal. It would consume it like entertainment. If she stayed silent, the myth would grow. But maybe that was better. Maybe some truths didn't need to be dissected. Maybe they needed to be remembered. Her gaze drifted to Evan. His hair had grown longer, falling across his face. He looked peaceful, untouched by the weight she carried. She smiled softly. "You deserve a quiet world, not one still chasing ghosts." She stood slowly, her bare feet touching the cool floor. Each step sent faint ripples of light across the tile, soft and fleeting. She walked to the window, opening it. The city below stretched endlessly, alive, unaware, ordinary. The core endures through memory, it whispered faintly. But memory needs a keeper. She looked at her reflection in the glass, human, tired, imperfect, and whispered, "Then let me be that." Her hand hovered over the camera one last time. Then, without hesitation, she pressed delete. The device beeped once, and the light within it died. Behind her, the monitors dimmed. The faint hum in her chest softened, as if sighing in agreement. The core didn't protest, it understood. Because she had done what none of its creators could. She'd chosen compassion over control, humanity over hunger. Moments later, Evan stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Mom," she turned, smiling gently. "Hey, sleepyhead." He sat up, blinking. "You okay?" "I think I finally am," she said quietly. He looked around. "They said we can go home today." She nodded, picking up her coat. "Then let's go before they change their minds." As they left the hospital, reporters waited outside. But this time, she didn't speak. No interviews, no explanations. Just a quiet smile and the warmth of her son's hand in hers. The crowd parted for her like water, and the sun broke through the clouds above, bathing the world in gold. For a moment the light caught her eyes, bright, shimmering, alive, but when it faded she looked completely human again. Evan squeezed her hand. "Mom, what'll happen to the mall now?" Claire looked toward the skyline where smoke still rose faintly in the distance. "They'll rebuild it," she said. "Maybe a school, maybe a shelter, something good." He smiled. "Like you wanted." She nodded. "Exactly like that." They crossed the street, the city moving around them. Busy, unaware, reborn. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, under the ruins of Silverwood Mall, the core slept once more. Its golden veins had gone cold, but its memory remained, echoing softly through the soil, through the rain, through time. It wasn't waiting for another owner or another experiment. It was waiting for the world to learn from what it had already seen. And above it all, Claire Lawson walked forward, not as a savior, not as a vessel, but as something far rarer, a human being who had faced the price of truth and chosen mercy instead. Sometimes the bravest choice isn't what you reveal to the world, it's what you protect from it. Months passed. The world moved on as it always does, slowly, unevenly, forgetting pieces of what once mattered. Silverwood Mall, that once, abandoned monument of greed and illusion, now existed only in memory and scattered news footage. What had been a scene of chaos was now a construction site filled with new sounds, hammers, laughter, life returning. Claire Lawson stood at the edge of the rebuilt courtyard, sunlight on her face, the air fresh with spring. The mall's new name hung proudly above the glass doors, Silverwood Community Center. Children played where the fountain once cracked open. The floors, recast in smooth marble and glass, still bore faint traces of gold, thin as veins, left untouched on purpose. They shimmered softly when sunlight hit, a silent reminder of the truth buried below. Claire watched as workers installed the last of the storefront signs, not for brands, but for small family-run shops and local businesses. One sign read Evans Books and Coffee. The boy himself, now taller and stronger, was stacking books inside, grinning at the scent of new pages. She smiled faintly. He always wanted a place that felt like home. Behind her, a voice spoke softly. "You built that for him." Claire turned. It was Mr. Hawthorne, the historian who'd once told her to stay away, the man who had seen the darkness of Silverwood long before anyone else dared to. His cane tapped gently against the newly paved floor as he approached. "Didn't think I'd see you back here," she said. He chuckled. "Didn't think I'd see this place alive again." He looked around, his old eyes glistening. "They kept your story alive, you know. Every paper, every network. They still talk about what happened, though I doubt any of them understand it." "That's all right," she said quietly. "They don't need to." He studied her face, the calm she wore like armor. "And you, are you finally at peace?" She paused before answering. watching Evan through the window as he laughed with a customer. "I think peace isn't something you find," she said softly. "It's something you build, one piece at a time." Hawthorne nodded slowly. "You've done more than rebuild. You've given this place a second life. Silverwood used to stand for everything wrong with people. Now it stands for something right." Claire smiled. "That's the plan." A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, a sound she hadn't heard here in years. The echo rippled gently through the air, almost like the hum that used to come from beneath the floors. She froze for a heartbeat, her gaze falling to the marble beneath her feet. There it was again, faint, rhythmic, soft. A vibration, not dangerous, not angry, just alive. A familiar whisper brushed the edge of her mind. "Still here." She smiled faintly, closing her eyes for a moment. "I know." Hawthorne watched her with curiosity. "Something wrong?" "No," she said, opening her eyes again. "Just remembering." He followed her gaze downward, his expression somber. "You think it's still down there?" Claire's smile didn't waver. "It doesn't matter if it is. It's quiet now. It's learned." He raised an eyebrow. "Learned?" She nodded, her voice soft but steady. "That power doesn't mean control. That truth can live in silence. And that sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward." Hawthorne let out a slow, thoughtful sigh. "You sound like a teacher now. Maybe that's what I've become." The sun climbed higher, washing the plaza in gold. Children's laughter mingled with the wind, and the faint glimmer of light beneath the new flooring danced like a secret between worlds. Evan stepped outside, waving. "Mom, come see." Claire turned, her smile blooming like dawn itself. She walked toward him, her steps light, the gold beneath her feet humming in gentle rhythm with each stride. He held up a wooden plaque freshly mounted beside the entrance. It read, "Dedicated to those who rebuild from ruins. Claire Lawson, 2025. She laughed softly, brushing her fingers across the engraving. "You didn't have to do that." Evan grinned. "You always said places remember the people who love them. This one should remember you." Her throat tightened with emotion, but she nodded. "Maybe it will." The breeze carried her words upward, past the glass ceiling and into the open sky. The city shimmered in the distance, alive with sound and motion, and for the first time she felt it fully. Peace. Behind her, in the shadows of the rebuilt atrium, a faint light pulsed once beneath the marble, like a heartbeat acknowledging her words, not ominous, not controlling, just listening. The core, or what remained of it, was no longer something to fear. It was simply there, woven into the foundation of something better, something human. Claire turned one last time toward the horizon, the sunlight reflecting in her eyes. The world had been rebuilt on the ashes of greed and the hands of compassion. Silverwood was no longer a monument to what was lost, but to what was possible. And as the bells chimed again, she whispered to herself, her voice steady and full of quiet faith, "Sometimes fortune isn't found, it's restored." The evening sun dipped low, painting the new Silverwood Community Center in molten gold. Its glass facade caught the dying light and scattered it across the courtyard, where people gathered, laughing, talking, living. What had once been the heart of decay was now filled with the pulse of life. Again, Claire stood near the fountain's new centerpiece, a sculpture of intertwined hands cast in bronze. Beneath it, a plaque read, "From greed to grace, may we always choose the light." The words had been Evan's idea. He stood beside her now, taller, older, but still holding the same unbreakable gentleness she'd fought so hard to protect. He watched the people move through the space that had once been a graveyard of ambition. "It feels different now," he said. "Like the buildings? Happy?" Claire smiled, brushing a lock of his hair back. "Buildings remember things, Evan. They remember pain, but they also remember love." He looked around, his eyes catching the faint shimmer of gold beneath the marble. Thin, delicate veins glowing only when the sunlight hit just right. Do you think it's still down there? She followed his gaze, her expression soft, distant. Yes, she said finally, but it's not what it used to be. It's resting, maybe dreaming. For a moment, they both stood in silence, watching the children play where the old vault once was. Their laughter echoed through the atrium, mingling with the sound of running water. A soft breeze swept through the open plaza, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the new gardens. The air was alive again, filled with promise instead of fear. From behind them, a familiar voice spoke, caged but kind. "M.S. Lawson." Claire turned to see Mr. Hawthorne again, his cane tapping lightly as he approached. His eyes sparkled with quiet pride. "You've done something remarkable. You turned a place built from lies into a monument of truth." Claire chuckled softly. "No, I just helped it remember what it was supposed to be." He smiled, nodding. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd taken the money?" She glanced at the horizon where the sun met the city's skyline. "Every day," she admitted, "but if I had, none of this would exist. It wouldn't have meant anything. You can't build peace out of greed." Hawthorne nodded slowly, eyes full of admiration. "You gave up a fortune." She looked toward Evan again, watching him hand a book to a laughing customer at his shop's window. "I didn't give it up," she said quietly. "I just found something worth more." For a moment the three of them stood together, watching the golden light fade. The mall reborn, renewed, seemed to hum faintly beneath their feet, like a gentle heartbeat acknowledging their words. The hum wasn't the same as before. It wasn't power or warning, it was gratitude. Claire whispered under her breath, almost to the air itself, "You're welcome." And somewhere deep below, the last flicker of gold shimmered once in answer, soft, calm, eternal. Later that night, when the crowds had gone and the city settled into its twilight rhythm, Claire returned alone. The center was quiet, the air still warm from the day. The lights had dimmed, leaving the atrium bathed in the soft glow of the moon through the skylight. She walked the corridors slowly, tracing her hand along the smooth walls. They no longer whispered to her. They simply existed, solid, silent, healed. In the center of the hall, she paused at the bronze fountain. The water trickled softly, reflecting the moonlight in silver waves. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a thin gold key, the same one she had found the day she bought them all for $1,000. She turned it over in her fingers, smiling. "You started all this, didn't you?" The key caught the light, glowing faintly. For a heartbeat, she felt that same pulse again, deep beneath the ground, a soft vibration of life, of connection. Claire knelt by the fountain and set the key gently into the water. It sank slowly, spinning as it fell, until it came to rest at the bottom where the golden veins met the bronze base. The ripples spread outward, distorting her reflection into rings of light. "There," she whispered, "now it belongs here." As she stood, the faint hum returned, not loud, not haunting, just enough for her to feel it. A final farewell. "Rest, Claire Lawson, you have balanced the scales." She closed her eyes, smiling through quiet tears. "Good night, Silverwood." The next morning, the first rays of sun filtered through the glass ceiling, catching the water in the fountain and scattering light across the floor. The golden veins gleamed faintly beneath the marble, alive in the morning warmth. Children arrived first, running through the courtyard, their laughter ringing like music. Evan opened his shop early, greeting them with stories and smiles. The community center filled with life, as if the building itself exhaled in relief. And if one listened closely enough, beneath the sound of footsteps and laughter, they might still hear it, the soft, rhythmic hum of the earth, not warning, not power, just presence. Claire's name, etched into the plaque at the entrance, glimmered in the rising sun. Claire Lawson, the woman who chose the light. And beneath that, a quote she'd chosen herself. "Sometimes, fortune isn't what you find beneath the floor, it's what you build above it." As the morning carried on and the city stirred to life, a faint breeze moved through the trees around Silverwood. The golden dust that had once threatened to consume everything now drifted harmlessly through the air, catching sunlight and vanishing into the sky. The core was no longer a secret or a weapon. It was part of the world again, transformed, redeemed, alive in the laughter, kindness and courage that replaced its silence. And at the center of it all, though unseen, its pulse remained steady, an eternal reminder that even in ruin there can be rebirth. Silverwood was no longer a monument to greed. It was proof that light, once found, never truly fades. The evening sun dipped low, painting the new Silverwood Community Center in molten gold. Its glass facade caught the dying light and scattered it across the courtyard, where people gathered, laughing, talking, living. What had once been the heart of decay was now filled with the pulse of life again. Claire stood near the fountain's new centerpiece, a sculpture of intertwined hands cast in bronze. Beneath it, a plaque read, ***, from greed to grace may we always choose the light. ***, the words had been Evan's idea. He stood beside her now, taller, older, but still holding the same unbreakable gentleness she'd fought so hard to protect. He watched the people move through the space that had once been a graveyard of ambition. "It feels different now," he said. "Like the buildings, happy." Claire smiled, brushing a lock of his hair back. "Buildings remember things, Evan. They remember pain, but they also remember love." He looked around, his eyes catching the faint shimmer of gold beneath the marble. Thin, delicate veins glowing only when the sunlight hit just right. "Do you think it's still down there?" She followed his gaze, her expression soft, distant. "Yes," she said finally, "but it's not what it used to be. It's resting, maybe dreaming." For a moment, they both stood in silence, watching the children play where the old vault once was. Their laughter echoed through the atrium, mingling with the sound of running water. A soft breeze swept through the open plaza, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the new gardens. The air was alive again, filled with promise instead of fear. From behind them, a familiar voice spoke, caged but kind. "M.S. Lawson." Claire turned to see Mr. Hawthorne again, his cane tapping lightly as he approached. His eyes sparkled with quiet pride. "You've done something remarkable. You turned a place built from lies into a monument of truth." Claire chuckled softly. "No, I just helped it remember what it was supposed to be." He smiled, nodding. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd taken the money?" She glanced at the horizon where the sun met the city's skyline. "Every day," she admitted, "but if I had, none of this would exist. It wouldn't have meant anything. You can't build peace out of greed." Hawthorne nodded slowly, eyes full of admiration. "You gave up a fortune." She looked toward Evan again, watching him hand a book to a laughing customer at his shop's window. "I didn't give it up," she said quietly. "I just found something worth more." For a moment, the three of them stood together, watching the golden light fade. The mall, reborn, renewed, seemed to hum faintly beneath their feet, like a gentle heart beat acknowledging their words. The hum wasn't the same as before. It wasn't power or warning. It was gratitude. Claire whispered under her breath, almost to the air itself, "You're welcome." And somewhere deep below, the last flicker of gold shimmered once in answer, soft, calm, eternal. Later that night, when the crowds had gone and the city settled into its twilight rhythm, Claire returned alone. The center was quiet, the air still warm from the day. The lights had dimmed, leaving the atrium bathed in the soft glow of the moon through the skylight. She walked the corridors slowly, tracing her hand along the smooth walls. They no longer whispered to her. They simply existed, solid, silent, healed. In the center of the hall, she paused at the bronze fountain. The water trickled softly, reflecting the moonlight in silver waves. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a thin gold key, the same one she had found the day she bought them all for $1,000. She turned it over in her fingers, smiling. You started all this, didn't you? The key caught the light, glowing faintly. For a heartbeat, she felt that same pulse again, deep beneath the ground, a soft vibration of life, of connection. Claire knelt by the fountain and set the key gently into the water. It sank slowly, spinning as it fell, until it came to rest at the bottom where the golden veins met the bronze base. The ripples spread outward, distorting her reflection into rings of light. There, she whispered, now it belongs here. As she stood, the faint hum returned, not loud, not haunting, just enough for her to feel it. A final farewell. A rest, Claire Lawson. You have balanced the scales. She closed her eyes, smiling through quiet tears. Good night, Silverwood. The next morning, the first rays of sun filtered through the glass ceiling, catching the water in the fountain and scattering light across the floor. The golden veins gleamed faintly beneath the marble, alive in the morning warmth. Children arrived first, running through the courtyard, their laughter ringing like music. Evan opened his shop early, greeting them with stories and smiles. The community center filled with life, as if the building itself exhaled in relief. And if one listened closely enough, beneath the sound of footsteps and laughter, they might still hear it, the soft, rhythmic hum of the earth, not warning, not power, just presence. Claire's name, etched into the plaque at the entrance, glimmered in the rising sun. Claire Lawson, the woman who chose the light. And beneath that, a quote she'd chosen herself. Sometimes, fortune isn't what you find beneath the floor, it's what you build above it. As the morning carried on and the city stirred to life, a faint breeze moved through the trees around Silverwood. The golden dust that had once threatened to consume everything now drifted harmlessly through the air, catching sunlight and vanishing into the sky. The core was no longer a secret or a weapon. It was part of the world again, transformed, redeemed, alive in the laughter, kindness, and courage that replaced its silence. And at the center of it all, though unseen, its pulse remained steady, an eternal reminder that even in ruin there can be rebirth. Silverwood was no longer a monument to greed. It was proof that light, once found, never truly fades.